The lie of comfort. Comfort is a slow kind of death. It doesn't choke you all at once. It lulls you to sleep while everything meaningful inside you quietly decays. You call it peace. You call it self-care. But often it's just surrender disguised as balance. Think about how easy it is to build your own cage and decorate it. A warm bed, familiar routines, predictable days, no surprises, no risks, no pain. You start believing that the absence of struggle means you're doing something right. But comfort isn't safety. It's sedation. It's the gentle hum that keeps you from hearing the sound of your own potential rusting. Every creature adapts to its environment. A lion raised in captivity forgets it was ever meant to hunt. A fish in a small tank stops growing, and a human surrounded by comfort forgets what it feels like to fight for something. The instincts fade, the hunger dulls. You become a well-fed ghost of what you could have been. Comfort feels kind, but it's merciless. It robs you of the friction that forges character. Growth hides where things hurt a little, where you're uncertain, clumsy, and exposed. The first step toward becoming more isn't peace. It's discomfort. So maybe the question isn't how can I make life easier? Maybe it's what am I losing by making it too easy? Take a moment to sit with that. Let the silence stretch. Because everything you want, everything you dream of being, lies just outside the border of what feels safe. When you stop hiding from discomfort, you stop hiding from yourself. And that's where the real transformation begins, though it comes with another realization: you were never really in control of anything. The myth of control. We build routines to trick ourselves into believing the world listens to us. We set alarms, make lists, plan futures. It gives the illusion of order, of mastery, of certainty. But the truth is simpler and more terrifying. You control almost nothing. The weather doesn't ask your permission to change. The people you love don't move according to your script. Even your body, this vessel you live inside, has its own agenda. One malfunction, one random accident, and everything shifts. Yet we spend our lives pretending we're at the center of the universe, steering the chaos like a captain on calm seas. Control is a beautiful lie. It comforts us. It gives shape to the unknown. But it's also the reason we suffer more than we need to. Because the tighter you hold on, the more it hurts when life reminds you that your grip is made of air. The Stoics saw this clearly. They said freedom doesn't come from controlling the world, but from controlling your reaction to it. That's where strength hides, not in domination, but in composure. The world can't be tamed, but your mind can learn to stand still inside the storm. So what happens if you stop fighting the river and start flowing with it? You don't lose power. You gain it. Because adaptability is power. Surrender, when it's conscious, isn't defeat. It's strategy. It's wisdom. Control was never peace. It was fear wearing armor. And when you put the armor down, something unexpected happens. Life becomes lighter. The chaos doesn't vanish, but it stops defining you. Let that thought settle. You never owned the storm. You only learned to breathe in it. And once you see that clearly, you begin to question the next lie, the one that says happiness is something you can chase and keep forever. The happiness trap. You've been sold the dream that happiness is a permanent state. That if you work hard enough, earn enough, love enough, you'll arrive somewhere, a final plateau where the air is thin and peaceful, and everything finally makes sense. But that place doesn't exist. Happiness is not a destination. It's a weather pattern. You can't trap it. You can only notice it passing through. People spend entire lives rearranging circumstances in pursuit of this invisible constant. They move cities, change partners, switch careers, all chasing a feeling that was never meant to stay. And when it inevitably fades, they call it failure. But it isn't failure. It's nature. Happiness is fleeting because it's supposed to remind you, not reward you. If every day were sunny, you'd forget what light feels like. Joy is the contrast against sorrow, meaning only exists beside loss. The human heart isn't built for eternal pleasure, it's built for rhythm. Highs and lows, expansion and contraction, joy and ache. That's how it grows. Take a breath and think about this. What if you stopped chasing happiness and started noticing peace instead? Peace doesn't require everything to be right. It just requires you to stop demanding that it be. There's beauty even in neutrality, even in the days that feel empty. Those are the moments when your soul takes inventory, quietly preparing for the next spark. So let happiness visit. Welcome it, feel it fully, and let it leave without resentment. The point was never to capture it. The point was to live deeply enough to notice when it comes. And when that awareness settles in, another question rises from the quiet. If happiness isn't permanent, why do we cling so desperately to the idea of certainty? The certainty illusion. The mind craves answers like lungs crave air. It wants to know why, how, when, what comes next. It can tolerate pain, but it can't tolerate ambiguity. And so it invents stories. It fills every gap with conclusions, no matter how fragile, just to avoid sitting in the dark. But certainty is fragile armor. You believe you know yourself, your path, your purpose, until life throws a single unpredictable stone and everything cracks. Certainty gives you a sense of balance, but it's built on assumptions. The moment you confuse assumption for truth, you stop evolving. Uncertainty, on the other hand, is brutal. It strips away illusions. It leaves you naked before the unknown, but it's also where possibility lives. Every breakthrough, every discovery, every moment of clarity begins in uncertainty. It's the doorway between what you know and what you're capable of knowing. Philosophers and scientists understand this paradox well. The more you know, the more you realize how little you truly understand. Wisdom isn't found in answers, it's found in comfort with mystery. So maybe it's time to stop hunting for guarantees. To stop trying to prove yourself right and start letting life surprise you. When you make peace with not knowing, you open a kind of freedom that certainty can't touch. Sit quietly for a second. Feel that unease. That space you're trying to fill with meaning, that's the edge of your own evolution. Don't rush to close it. And once you stop needing the world to be predictable, something even deeper emerges, the recognition that the person clinging to certainty, the one you call you, might not be as solid as you think. The identity mirage. You tell yourself a story every day. This is who I am. You fill it with names, habits, preferences, traumas, and dreams. You call it your identity, your truth. But look closely, and it starts to dissolve. The person you were 5 years ago is a stranger wearing your face. The version of you that exists today is temporary, a snapshot in motion. Identity is not a thing. It's a process, a dance between memory and choice. But we cling to it because we fear the alternative formlessness, the unknown. If you're not this or that, then who are you? So you repeat old scripts. I'm not the kind of person who, that's just how I am. You build walls around your past and call it authenticity. The irony is, you lose authenticity the moment you stop changing. Every identity becomes outdated eventually, like software that can't handle new information. You can keep running it, but it will crash under the weight of life's updates. The truth is quieter and less flattering. You're a collection of shifting patterns. You reinvent yourself with every choice, every conversation, every heartbreak. The self isn't something to find. It's something to build and rebuild endlessly. And maybe that's not tragic at all. Maybe it's the most hopeful thing about being human. You're not trapped in who you were. You're not defined by who others think you are. You are free to dissolve and reassemble 1,000 times before the end. Take a moment to feel that freedom. The world doesn't need a consistent version of you. It needs a present one. And the more you stop performing yourself, the lighter everything becomes. Because here's the secret you've been afraid to admit. Almost no one is paying as much attention to you as you think they are. The spotlight fallacy. You spend so much of your life worrying about what people think. The way you walk into a room, the way you sound in a meeting, the way your life looks from the outside. You live under an invisible spotlight, one you think is always on you. But here's the truth. It isn't. Most people are too busy performing under their own spotlight to notice yours. We carry this delusion from childhood, where the smallest mistake felt catastrophic. Every slip was humiliation. Every awkward moment the end of the world. But as you grow older, you start realizing that no one remembers half the things you still replay in your mind. The world moves too fast to care. It's liberating and depressing at the same time. You matter deeply, and yet not that much. Your pain, your failures, your insecurities, everyone has their own. And that realization is where peace begins. Because once you stop acting for an audience that isn't watching, you start living for something pure, truth. The spotlight was never real. It was built from fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of being ordinary, the fear that if you stop performing, you'll vanish. But when you step out of that imaginary glare, you see things more clearly. You notice others more deeply. You notice yourself without judgment. And that's where confidence quietly blooms, not from being admired, but from no longer needing to be. Take a breath and imagine what your life would feel like without that constant self-consciousness. You'd speak more freely, move more naturally, choose without the weight of impression. You'd stop surviving for applause and start existing for experience. When you stop believing everyone's watching, you finally start seeing. And when that happens, a quieter truth reveals itself. Your obsession with progress might not be progress at all. The progress illusion. You wake up early. You check tasks off lists. You're always in motion, chasing goals, upgrading systems, optimizing every corner of your life. You tell yourself you're growing. But are you, or have you just learned to confuse activity with meaning? We live in an era addicted to progress. Productivity has replaced purpose. Success has replaced fulfillment. We measure life by forward motion, but rarely stop to ask, where are we going and why? A person can run an entire lifetime on a treadmill of achievement and never take a single step toward peace. There's nothing wrong with ambition, but when progress becomes identity, it becomes addiction. You start believing stillness equals failure. You fear silence because it exposes the emptiness underneath all the noise. And so you keep moving, not towards something but away from something: discomfort, doubt, truth. Sometimes what looks like stagnation is exactly what you need. The pause before clarity, the breath before change. A seed doesn't grow by constant movement. It grows by stillness in the dark. Maybe your next leap forward requires stopping long enough to listen. The irony of progress is that it can make you forget what it's supposed to serve: joy, depth, connection. You climb ladders without knowing if they lean against the right wall. You hit milestones that no longer matter once you reach them. The machine of progress eats meaning unless you stop to feed it reflection. Sit with that for a moment. You don't need to move faster. You need to move consciously. And when you stop mistaking movement for meaning, you start noticing another trap, one that turns even success into suffering: comparison. The echo of comparison. Nothing poisons joy faster than measuring it. You scroll through lives that look shinier than yours, and suddenly gratitude feels like failure. Someone younger, richer, happier, more admired. It never ends. You can't win a race that has no finish line. Comparison begins as curiosity and ends as corrosion. You start asking, why not me? Instead of, what do I actually want? The question itself is the problem. It assumes your worth depends on others' reflection. And that's the root of quiet misery. You outsource your self-respect to strangers. Social media made it worse, but comparison isn't new. Humans have always compared: tribe, status, beauty, power. What's changed is exposure. You used to compare yourself to your village. Now your village is the world. No wonder everyone feels behind. But here's the brutal truth. Every life you envy hides costs you wouldn't pay. That perfect relationship might be hollow. That enviable success might have taken a soul with it. The photo is real, but the life behind it rarely is. The only fair comparison is with your past self, the one who didn't know what you know now. Every step away from ignorance is progress, even when it doesn't look impressive from the outside. Take a deep breath and let the envy dissolve. Someone else's beauty doesn't steal yours. Their success doesn't shrink your potential. If you measure your worth by others, you'll always lose, because there will always be someone ahead. Peace begins when you no longer need to win every invisible race. And once that realization sinks in, you start noticing how deeply your need for comfort feeds that same cycle of comparison. The addiction to ease. The world has never been more convenient, and yet people have never felt weaker. You can order comfort to your door, scroll away boredom, mute the world with a single tap. Every discomfort now comes with an escape route, and slowly, imperceptibly, we forget how to endure. Ease is the new addiction. It masquerades as progress, but steals resilience. The human mind was built for challenge. It needs resistance to stay sharp. Take that away, and it begins to wilt. Like a muscle never used, the will to fight atrophies. We think we crave rest, but what we actually crave is meaning. And meaning only appears through effort, through the struggle that forces you to become more than you were yesterday. When everything is effortless, even joy loses flavor. Ease makes life smooth, but it also makes it shallow. There's nothing wrong with comfort in moderation. The problem is when it becomes default. When you start avoiding friction as if it were a disease. Discomfort isn't punishment. It's proof you're alive, still learning, still stretching against your limits. Try sitting with a bit of unease today. Resist the urge to escape it. Notice what it reveals. Because beneath discomfort, there's always clarity. Beneath pain, there's always growth waiting. When you trade every struggle for convenience, you don't make life better, you make it smaller. Ease is not freedom. It's sedation with prettier furniture. And when that sinks in, the mirror becomes impossible to avoid, because the easiest person to lie to is always yourself. The mirror of denial. We all like to think we're honest with ourselves. But the truth is, most people spend years constructing delicate illusions just to avoid seeing what hurts. You don't lie because you're evil. You lie because truth demands change, and change demands pain. Denial is protection at first. It shields the mind from what it isn't ready to face. You minimize the problem, reinterpret the story, bury the evidence, and for a while it works. You feel safe, but safety built on denial isn't safety. It's delay. And what you delay always grows in the dark. Every time you refuse to face a truth, you choose to carry it instead. It doesn't disappear. It just waits. It whispers in the quiet. It leaks into your choices. It shows up as exhaustion, as anger, as emptiness you can't explain. Until one day you can't keep the story straight anymore. The mask cracks. The truth floods in, and with it, liberation and loss at the same time. Seeing yourself clearly is brutal. You'll mourn the lies that once protected you. But what comes next is sacred, because only truth can build something real. Every illusion you destroy creates space for something honest to take root. Pause here for a moment. Think about one truth you've been avoiding. The conversation, the behavior, the habit. The longer you hide from it, the louder it gets. Denial is comfort. Honesty is fire. But fire cleanses. It burns away what's false so that what's true can finally breathe. And once you've walked through that fire, there's no going back. Because clarity once seen cannot be unseen. Life owes you nothing. You grow up thinking the universe keeps score. That goodness earns reward, that hard work guarantees results, that life is a ledger balancing pain and pleasure. But existence doesn't work like that. The world is not moral, and the universe doesn't care who deserves what. A storm destroys the house of a kind man and leaves a cruel neighbors untouched. Disease visits children, and tyrants die in silk sheets. Nature isn't cruel. It's indifferent. It moves according to laws, not justice. We hate that truth because it leaves no one to blame. If the universe isn't fair, then effort becomes a gamble, not a promise. And yet, in that unfairness lies something pure, because when life owes you nothing, every good thing becomes a gift rather than a debt collected. The rain doesn't fall because you earned it. The sunrise doesn't appear because you prayed for it. They simply are. Gratitude becomes the only rational response to an irrational world. Pause here. Feel how heavy expectation is. Then imagine setting it down. When you stop expecting fairness, you stop resenting reality. You start working with it instead of against it. The universe isn't here to serve you. It's here to challenge you. And the sooner you stop demanding fairness, the sooner you start creating meaning. But that realization leads to an even sharper one. Maybe deserving itself was just a story humans invented to feel safe. The myth of deserving. The idea of deserving is comforting. It tells you there's order, that goodness guarantees reward, that struggle leads somewhere. But the truth is harder. Deserving is a human word, not a universal law. People often confuse effort with entitlement. They say, I worked hard, so I deserve happiness. But life isn't a contract. It's an ecosystem. A tiger doesn't deserve its meal. It earns it by surviving the hunt. Rain doesn't fall where it's needed. It falls where it must. The myth of deserving breeds quiet bitterness. When things go wrong, you think you've been betrayed. But who promised you justice? Who said you were owed a happy ending? What you truly deserve is the chance to try. Everything else, love, luck, success, is borrowed from chaos. The tragedy isn't that the world is unfair. It's that we expected it to be anything else. Let that thought breathe for a moment. Fairness was never written into nature. We wrote it into law and called it morality. It's a beautiful illusion, but an illusion still. Once you stop seeing life as a transaction, you start seeing it as an experiment, and in experiments, failure isn't injustice, it's data. So stop asking what you deserve and start asking what you can create. Because every choice you make shapes a world that owes you nothing, and those choices carry weight more than you realize. The weight of choice. Freedom sounds beautiful until you feel its gravity. Every decision you make kills infinite possibilities. Every path you choose closes doors you'll never open again. We romanticize choice, but choice is sacrifice wearing polite clothing. You wanted freedom, and you got it. But now you carry the burden of authorship. There's no one to blame, no destiny to hide behind. You build your life brick by brick, and every brick is chosen. Some people spend their lives avoiding choice just to escape that weight. They delay decisions, blame circumstances, or wait for signs. But indecision is still a decision. It's the choice to surrender your power quietly. The truth no one wants to hear is that freedom hurts. It hurts because it demands responsibility. The moment you realize your future is shaped by your own hand, you also realize how easily you can ruin it. That's the cost of agency. Anxiety is the tax on autonomy. But that's also where beauty lives. Because the same freedom that terrifies you is the one that allows transformation. You can change direction at any moment. You can rebuild yourself from ruin. Sit with that paradox. Every choice is a small death and a small birth. The only wrong decision is refusing to decide. And when the weight of freedom feels unbearable, remember, the heaviest truth of all is coming. No one else is coming to carry it for you. No one is coming. This is the lesson most people spend a lifetime avoiding. We wait for rescue, for permission, for someone wiser, richer, braver to show us the way. We wait for the perfect mentor, the right partner, the helping hand that will finally make things easier. But no one is coming. The cavalry doesn't exist. The mentor might guide you, the friend might support you, but the work, your work, remains yours alone. The longer you wait for someone to save you, the more you train yourself to be powerless. There's a strange peace that comes when you stop expecting rescue. It feels lonely at first, but then freeing. You realize the voice you've been waiting to hear was always your own. The hero you're searching for is built one small act of courage at a time. Every person who ever changed their life did it the same way, by deciding that waiting was a waste of time. They stopped hoping for a map and started walking. They learned to hold their own hand in the dark. Pause for a moment and imagine how different your life would look if you stopped outsourcing your salvation. You'd stop begging fate for mercy. You'd start building the strength you thought would be given. When you finally understand that no one is coming, you stop looking for miracles and start becoming one. And that's when you face life itself with new eyes, realizing just how fragile every plan you've made truly is. The fragility of plans. You plan your future like it's a blueprint. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. And it makes you feel secure. You tell yourself you know where things are heading, but life loves to laugh at blueprints. One wrong turn, one accident, one unexpected storm, and the future you designed dissolves overnight. The truth is, planning gives comfort, not certainty. We don't plan to control life. We plan to calm the chaos inside us. It's not that plans are useless. They're necessary, but they're fragile, and pretending otherwise only multiplies the pain when they crumble. Because sooner or later, they all do. The wise don't plan for a perfect path. They plan for imperfection. They understand that resilience matters more than precision. The goal isn't to avoid being shaken. It's to build roots that can bend without breaking. Look back at your life. How many of your failures were really just life redirecting you? How many broken plans became the beginning of something better? The future rarely asks for your consent before it rewrites itself. So keep planning, but write your plans in pencil, not stone, and keep an eraser close. Because life doesn't reward those who predict it, it rewards those who adapt. And in that realization begins the next hard truth. If you can't control life and no one's coming to fix it, the only freedom left is the one found in how you respond to blame. The problem of blame. Blame is seductive. It makes chaos feel organized. It gives suffering a face. When something breaks, the mind races to find a culprit. It's easier to point than to reflect. Someone must be responsible. Someone must pay. But blame, for all its satisfaction, is a cage. The moment you assign fault, you hand away your freedom, because the longer you dwell on who caused the wound, the less energy you have to heal it. The person who wronged you might never apologize. The universe might never explain itself. And waiting for that justice keeps you trapped in a story that no longer moves. Responsibility is heavier, but it's the only way out. When you take responsibility for your response, even when it wasn't your fault, you reclaim power. You stop being a victim of what happened and start being the author of what happens next. It's not about excusing cruelty or pretending harm didn't occur. It's about refusing to let bitterness become your identity, because every ounce of energy you invest in blame is energy stolen from rebuilding. Pause here. Ask yourself, who are you still blaming for the way your life looks? The answer will reveal the border of your freedom. The world will never apologize in full, but you can forgive reality anyway. That's how power returns. And once you stop pointing fingers outward, you start realizing that ignorance, the refusal to see things as they are, is the costliest mistake of all. The price of ignorance. Ignorance feels safe, doesn't it? Not knowing means not worrying. Not questioning means not suffering. You can hide behind comfort, behind "I didn't know," and pretend you're untouched by what's too heavy to face. But ignorance is never free. It always collects its debt. Every truth you avoid becomes a chain around your future. Every time you look away, the problem grows teeth in the dark. You may not see it, but it's still there, sharpening. History repeats because people prefer stories to facts. Relationships decay because people prefer peace to honesty. Nations collapse because people prefer ignorance to responsibility. There's a line that divides comfort and truth, and crossing it costs something: pride, safety, illusions. But staying behind it costs everything else. Knowledge hurts, but blindness kills. Learning to see means giving up the luxury of pretending. You'll lose the calm that comes with not knowing. You'll lose excuses, but in return you gain agency. The truth doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer, and clarity is what makes movement possible. Think about this for a moment. Every ignorance you cling to today becomes tomorrow's regret. Every truth you resist becomes the wall you'll later have to climb. There's no escaping the price. You only choose when to pay it, and the longer you wait, the more expensive it becomes. Ignorance is always cheaper now than it will be later. And perhaps the reason we cling to it is because it's hard to accept that everything, people, plans, even meaning itself, eventually crumbles. Because in the end, entropy always wins. Entropy always wins. Everything falls apart. Every structure you build, every body you inhabit, every system you trust, it all decays. This isn't pessimism, it's physics. Entropy is the universe's quiet law of surrender. Over time, everything moves from order to chaos, from energy to exhaustion. We resist it because decay feels like defeat. We want permanence. We build monuments, save photos, write books, have children, all attempts to fight the slide into disorder. But no creation escapes the law. Even the stars themselves burn out. Even light fades into background noise. At first, this truth feels hopeless. Why build anything if everything collapses? But look closer. Entropy isn't just destruction, it's transformation. The fallen tree becomes soil for another. The ending of one life feeds the beginning of countless others. The world doesn't stop, it recycles. Accepting entropy doesn't mean giving up. It means building with awareness that what you build will someday fall, and doing it anyway. That's courage. That's art. To live meaningfully inside decay is the highest form of defiance. So don't chase immortality. Chase creation. Let your work, your love, your kindness burn brightly, even if briefly. Because the flame's beauty was never in how long it lasted, but in how fiercely it burned while it did. And when you understand that decay is the rule, not the exception, the next truth begins to surface: everything you love will eventually leave, no matter how tightly you hold it. The law of loss. Loss is the price of love. Every connection you form, every joy you hold, it all carries an invisible countdown. You can't escape it. The moment you gain something, the clock begins to tick toward losing it. People think grief comes after loss, but grief is already there, waiting inside love itself. Every embrace, every laugh, every shared moment contains a whisper. This will end. You don't hear it until it's gone. The instinct is to protect yourself, to care less, to risk less, to hide from the heartbreak before it comes. But that's not safety. It's starvation. To avoid loss, you must avoid love, and to avoid love, you must stop living. There's another way. You can stop resisting impermanence and start loving with awareness. Love harder because it ends. Appreciate deeper because it fades. When you realize everything is borrowed, gratitude becomes automatic. It hurts, yes, but that pain is proof that you experience something real. Loss is the echo of meaning. Take a quiet breath and feel the grief in what's beautiful. It's not weakness, it's the human condition made visible. Everything you love will end, but not everything you love will be lost. Some things remain, not in permanence, but in transformation. And once you accept that, you stop fearing endings. You begin to see the strange mercy hidden inside them. Because the final lesson of reality is this: truth always cuts before it heals. The brutal gift of reality. Reality doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't tailor itself to your expectations or pause for your healing. It simply reveals itself, over and over until you finally stop resisting. At first, clarity feels like cruelty. The masks drop. The illusions dissolve. You see people as they are, not as you hoped. You see yourself without filters. It's devastating. But the pain isn't punishment. It's purification. The world isn't being cruel. It's being honest. Every delusion you let die frees you a little more. Every truth you face, no matter how harsh, sharpens your vision. That's why reality feels brutal at first, because you're detoxing from fantasy. Take a deep breath. Think of all the moments you thought would destroy you, but instead became turning points. The pain you resisted most was often the teacher you needed most. Reality strips you bare, but only so it can rebuild you on steadier ground. Clarity hurts, but confusion kills, and pain, when faced, eventually softens into wisdom. That's the gift. Life never promised kindness, but it always promises lessons. And when the illusions finally die, something else is born. You, the one not built from lies, not running from fear, the one who can finally begin again. Because after reality breaks you, it doesn't end you. It hands you the pieces and waits to see what you'll create next. The enemy within, the most dangerous enemy you'll ever face, doesn't live outside you. It lives behind your eyes, whispering with your own voice. It knows exactly what you fear, what excuses you'll believe, and how to make stagnation feel like safety. You can't run from it. You can only expose it. This inner enemy wears many disguises. Some days it's doubt. Other days it's procrastination dressed as caution. Sometimes it's the quiet voice that says, "You've done enough. You can rest now." It doesn't want destruction. It wants comfort. And that's what makes it lethal. The battle within isn't about winning once. It's about noticing the war every day. You can conquer the world, achieve everything, and still be ruled by that subtle saboteur whispering, "You're not ready yet." It feeds on inaction, on small delays, on the stories you tell yourself to avoid change. Take a moment to notice how your mind resists discomfort even now, how it tries to retreat into familiarity. That's the enemy at work. But here's the truth, it fears most. Awareness kills it. The moment you see it clearly, it loses control. Your greatest victories won't be loud. They'll be quiet moments when you catch yourself about to surrender and simply don't. And that's when you start to see another layer of deception, the mask your ego built to hide your fear of insignificance. The ego's mask. The ego is fragile glass, pretending to be steel. It's the voice that insists you're special, misunderstood, destined for greatness. It flatters you when you win and curses the world when you lose. But its purpose isn't to make you strong. It's to make you dependent on validation. The louder your ego becomes, the further you drift from truth. You start performing instead of being, defending instead of understanding. Every argument becomes a battlefield, every disagreement a threat to your existence. You stop listening to learn and start listening to win. The tragedy is that the ego doesn't want love. It wants superiority. It wants to be right more than it wants to be real. But under that armor is something softer, something the ego is terrified to admit: vulnerability. The fear that without titles, achievements, or admiration, there might be nothing left. Drop the mask for a moment. Who are you beneath the applause? Beneath the image you've built? If that question makes you uneasy, it's because the ego has been speaking for too long. Freedom begins when you stop confusing self-worth with performance. You don't have to prove yourself. You just have to be yourself. But being is harder. It demands humility. It demands silence. And silence is dangerous territory because that's where the next tyrant hides, the one made of your own emotions. The tyranny of emotion. Emotions are powerful allies but cruel masters. They color every perception, shape every judgment, and disguise themselves as truth. When you're angry, the world looks unjust. When you're afraid, the world looks hostile. When you're in love, the world glows with meaning. But the world hasn't changed. You have. We like to believe our emotions are honest messengers. Sometimes they are, but often they're exaggerations of memory, chemistry, and ego. They scream louder than reason because they want to protect you, not enlighten you. The problem is, they protect you from everything, including growth. The mind enslaved to emotion mistakes reaction for authenticity. I feel it, therefore it's real. But feelings aren't facts, they're weather patterns passing through consciousness. You can acknowledge them without worshiping them. Imagine sitting beside a storm instead of standing in it. You still feel the wind, but you're not thrown around by it. That's emotional mastery, not suppression, but observation. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. Because when emotion stops ruling you, empathy returns, perspective returns. You start choosing responses instead of reacting from habit. The tyrant loses power the moment you refuse to obey. And when the noise quiets, a deeper craving emerges. The one emotion rules best: desire. The prison of desire. Desire begins as movement. It gets you out of bed, pushes you to improve, to explore, to build. But left unchecked, it becomes a cage made of craving. You tell yourself you're chasing fulfillment, but what you're really chasing is escape, from boredom, from emptiness, from yourself. Every desire whispers, when I have this, I'll be enough. But the moment you get it, the whisper shifts. Maybe just a little more. The mind invents new appetites faster than life can satisfy them. That's the cruel trick. Satisfaction doesn't end desire. It feeds it. The Buddha called this the root of suffering. Not pain, not loss, but attachment. Because when you tie your happiness to something external, you also tie your peace to its disappearance. And everything disappears eventually. Take a breath and imagine wanting nothing, not from greed or exhaustion, but because you've already arrived. That feeling you think waits at the end of your achievements. It's available now in the quiet absence of needing. Desire is a fire, useful when contained, destructive when worshipped. Let it warm you, but don't live inside it, because the more you feed it, the more it devours your stillness, and stillness is where you'll finally meet the self you've been running from. The fear of stillness. Stillness terrifies most people. Because when the noise fades, when the phone is silent and the world stops asking for your attention, the mind begins to reveal what you've been hiding from. The truth surfaces, uncomfortable, unfiltered, honest. And that's why people keep moving, not for purpose, but for distraction. We say we fear boredom, but boredom is just a mask for self-confrontation. In stillness, you can't perform. You can't hide behind busyness or ambition. You face yourself without costume, and sometimes that's unbearable. But stillness is not emptiness. It's exposure. It's the moment the fog clears and you finally see the machinery of your own thoughts. That's why monks sit in silence, and why people who avoid it often drown in noise. They're terrified of hearing their own echoes. Try sitting in silence long enough to feel the restlessness rise. Watch your thoughts without interfering. Watch how quickly the mind tries to run. That's the ego panicking because its distractions are gone. The peace you seek isn't in movement, it's beneath it, beneath anxiety, beneath noise, beneath the endless doing. Stillness doesn't erase your demons. It introduces you to them. But once you know their names, they stop ruling you. And from that quiet, a new strength starts forming, the discipline to move when it matters, not when you're desperate to escape. The myth of motivation. Motivation is the most overrated fuel in existence. You wait for it like weather, hoping the right mood, the right inspiration, the right timing will arrive before you begin. But motivation is unreliable. It's a visitor, not a resident. It comes when you don't need it and vanishes when you do. People who depend on motivation rarely build anything lasting, because motivation demands emotion, energy, excitement, belief. Discipline asks for something quieter, commitment without enthusiasm, showing up when you don't feel like it, acting without the promise of reward. Think of the sculptor chipping away at marble in silence, the athlete training before dawn, the parent repeating the same exhausting routine. They're not driven by inspiration. They're driven by habit. The emotion isn't the engine, it's the noise. Motivation makes you feel good about starting. Discipline makes you proud of finishing. And over time, discipline becomes freedom. Because once your actions no longer depend on how you feel, you become unstoppable. Take a moment to imagine what your life would look like if you stopped waiting for energy and started honoring decisions. You'd stop being at the mercy of moods. You'd become your own momentum. Motivation makes things possible. Discipline makes them inevitable. And when you stop relying on fleeting emotion, you start noticing the quieter decisions that shape your destiny, the things you keep avoiding. The cost of avoidance. Every problem you avoid compounds in silence. Every feeling you suppress, every task you delay, every conversation you postpone, it all grows teeth while you're looking away. Avoidance doesn't erase discomfort, it multiplies it. You tell yourself you're buying peace, but what you're really buying is debt. Emotional, mental, spiritual. And that debt always comes due. One day you wake up buried under the weight of everything you didn't face. The truth, ignored long enough, becomes poison. Avoidance is seductive because it disguises itself as control. Not now, you whisper. I'll deal with it when I'm ready. But readiness never arrives. Fear doesn't dissolve with time. It decays into regret. It takes courage to confront what hurts, but the pain of facing it is finite. The pain of avoiding it is endless. When you finally turn around and face the thing you've been running from, you often find it was smaller than you imagined and that you were stronger than you believed. Sit with this thought for a second. Your freedom lies on the other side of what you least want to feel. The work, the apology, the boundary, the truth. It all waits there. And the longer you wait, the heavier it gets. The cost of avoidance isn't fear. It's the life you could have lived without it. And that's why potential, as beautiful as it sounds, often feels like punishment. The burden of potential. Potential is supposed to inspire, but sometimes it haunts. Because the moment someone tells you what you could become, they also tell you what you haven't become yet. Potential is a mirror showing you everything that still lies undone. People romanticize it, but potential is a debt to yourself, a contract between who you are and who you might be. Every day you ignore it, interest accrues in the form of guilt. You start feeling restless without knowing why. That's the burden speaking. And yet, perfectionism often hides behind potential. You wait for perfect timing, perfect clarity, perfect conditions. But perfection is just procrastination dressed in pride. The world doesn't reward the most gifted. It rewards the most consistent. Potential means nothing without movement. A seed can hold the blueprint for a forest, but without soil and pressure and time, it remains a tiny thing full of unrealized beauty. You're the same. Take a breath and release the fantasy of what you could be. Instead, do something small that proves you're already becoming. Potential is a promise, one you renew every time you take action. The tragedy isn't dying without achieving everything. It's dying without having tried. And behind that fear of not becoming lies another, more subtle lie, the belief that perfection equals worth. The self-image lie. We all build an image of ourselves and then spend years defending it. We want to be seen as kind, capable, strong, intelligent, whatever earns approval. But self-image is rarely truth. It's strategy. It's the version of you designed for acceptance. You start performing your identity instead of living it. You adjust your words, posture, even your dreams, just to align with the picture you think others admire. You don't grow into who you are, you maintain who you appear to be. The danger of that performance is subtle. The more convincing the image becomes, the harder it is to admit when it's false. You cling to outdated versions of yourself because letting go would mean facing the emptiness beneath them. Authenticity isn't about knowing who you are, it's about having the courage to change who you've been. The self isn't a statue, it's a river, always moving, always reshaping itself. You don't lose integrity by evolving, you lose it by pretending not to. So stop guarding the mask. Let people misunderstand you. Let them see you mid-transformation. It's messy, but real. The person you're trying so hard to protect isn't even here anymore. When you stop chasing the perfect reflection, you finally meet the person behind the glass. And that encounter, the one between who you are and who you've pretended to be, is the real mirror test. The mirror test. Stand alone in front of a mirror and look, really look. Not the quick glance you give before work, not the practice smile you flash to prove you're fine. Look until the surface stops being skin and starts being story. You'll see exhaustion that no filter hides, regrets tucked beneath the eyes, strength that never got enough credit, fear disguised as calm. Every version of you coexisting in one fragile face. Most people can't hold that gaze for long. The silence becomes unbearable because mirrors don't just reflect, they confront. They force you to see the distance between who you are and who you promised yourself you'd be. But that discomfort is sacred. It's the beginning of truth. You can't become real without first admitting where you've been pretending. The mirror doesn't judge. It just waits. It asks one quiet question. Are you still lying to yourself? If you can look into your own eyes and admit both failure and potential without flinching, you're already winning the war within. Because honesty with yourself is the seed of every other kind of freedom. The mirror test isn't about beauty or flaws. It's about courage, the courage to see clearly and still choose love for the person staring back. And once you pass that test, the war inside quiets, not because it's over, but because you finally know who's fighting. From there, the struggle turns outward toward understanding the strange, shifting theater of human behavior that surrounds you. The currency of power. Power is older than language. Before humans could speak, they could signal dominance through posture, tone, silence. Power has always been the invisible gravity that shapes every interaction. It determines who leads, who follows, who gets to speak, and who is remembered afterward. But power isn't what most people think it is. It isn't loud. It doesn't always come from status, money, or appearance. Real power is control of perception, the ability to influence how others feel in your presence. Sometimes it's charm, sometimes it's composure, sometimes it's the quiet refusal to be moved by intimidation. Influence outlasts talent because it plays the longer game. Talent creates moments. Power creates systems. The people who change the world rarely shout. They listen. They read the room. They move when others freeze. Power isn't about being feared. It's about being predictable enough to trust and mysterious enough to respect. But the pursuit of power has a cost. Once you start craving it, you begin molding yourself for advantage rather than authenticity. You measure every gesture for gain, every silence for effect. Eventually, you forget who you are when no one's watching. Take a quiet moment to think about who has power over you, not politically, but emotionally, whose opinion can ruin your day, whose approval controls your peace. That's the real ledger of power. And once you see those invisible strings, you start to understand how deeply humans crave validation and how that craving builds a prison of its own. The prison of approval. We spend much of our lives auditioning for acceptance. At school, at work, online, even in love, we perform versions of ourselves shaped by what we think others will applaud. The approval feels good, so we chase more. But the more we chase, the more we shrink. You tell yourself it's harmless. That being liked is proof you're doing something right. But living for approval means dying by rejection. It means surrendering your peace to strangers who don't even know your full story. The prison is subtle. You don't see the bars until someone disapproves. Suddenly, your confidence wavers, your decisions falter. You realize your sense of worth was never yours to begin with. It was rented from the crowd. Freedom doesn't mean rejecting connection. It means detaching identity from applause. You can still love people deeply, still value feedback, still crave belonging, but you stop needing permission to exist. Approval becomes information, not oxygen. Ask yourself this: how many choices in your life were made to avoid disapproval rather than to pursue truth? The answer might sting, but that sting is liberation in disguise, because the day you stop performing, you start living. And once you step out of that cage, you begin to notice how easily morality itself can become performance, a way to gain approval rather than live by conviction. The performance of virtue, goodness, in the modern world often comes with an audience. We post our kindness, we share our charity, we broadcast our empathy. Virtue becomes not something we practice, but something we perform, and performance is always self-serving. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do good, but when goodness becomes theater, it stops being about others and starts being about image. It's easier to post a quote about compassion than to actually forgive someone. Easier to condemn evil online than to confront it in ourselves. Public virtue makes us feel righteous without demanding transformation. It feeds the ego under the mask of morality. The danger is that performance begins to replace practice. You become addicted to being perceived as good rather than actually doing good. And perception can't save anyone. True virtue happens when no one's watching. It's quiet, unseen. It's returning the cart in the rain, admitting you were wrong, telling the truth even when it makes you smaller. There are no likes for that kind of goodness, only self-respect. Take a deep breath and imagine doing something kind with no reward, no record, no audience. That is integrity, the rarest currency in the modern world. And once you start valuing truth over appearance, you begin to see how fragile relationships built on image can be, especially those dressed as friendship. The politics of friendship. Not all friendships are born from love. Some are built from convenience, shared interests, or silent transactions. You trade validation, time, secrets, or status, and when one of those currencies runs out, the bond starts to fade. We like to think friendship is sacred, but like every human relationship, it has politics, unspoken hierarchies, subtle debts, emotional negotiations. You comfort me, I admire you. You listen, I stay loyal. Over time, the balance shifts, and one person begins to feel the weight. True friendship is rare because it requires equality, neither person trying to own the other's light. But most people don't want equals. They want mirrors that flatter them. They want safety, not truth. The hardest moment in any friendship is when you realize it's built on illusion. The version of you they love isn't always real. Sometimes it's the version that doesn't threaten them. And the moment you grow beyond that, tension begins to surface. You can love someone deeply and still outgrow them. You can miss someone and still know the connection died honestly. If you ever have to shrink to keep a friendship alive, it's no longer friendship, it's management. Take a moment to remember who you feel lighter around. That's who sees you, not who uses you. And sometimes, being seen requires a kind of kindness that doesn't look kind at all. The cost of niceness. Niceness is often mistaken for goodness. You smile, you agree, you avoid conflict, you soften your words, even when they need to be sharp. But niceness isn't kindness. It's fear wearing politeness. It's the art of self-erasure disguised as virtue. Niceness wants to be liked. Kindness wants to do right. One protects feelings, the other protects truth. When you live to please, you slowly disappear. You swallow your boundaries, your opinions, your anger, all to keep the peace. But peace built on suppression is just quiet resentment, and resentment left long enough becomes contempt. The hardest lesson for a people pleaser is that not everyone deserves your softness. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're clarity. Sometimes kindness looks like confrontation. Sometimes love sounds like no. Real goodness isn't gentle all the time. Sometimes it's fierce, sometimes it disappoints people, but it never lies. So stop being nice when honesty is needed. Stop smiling through what hurts. The world doesn't need another agreeable ghost. It needs people who care enough to be real, even when real is uncomfortable. And when you finally choose truth over approval, you start noticing how often people pretend to agree, not out of conviction, but out of fear. That illusion, the illusion of consensus, is where the next lesson begins. The illusion of consensus. Agreement feels safe. When everyone nods, you can rest. When no one questions, you can believe you're right. But collective comfort is rarely truth. It's maintenance. People don't agree because they all see clearly. They agree because they're all afraid of standing alone. Consensus gives the illusion of intelligence, but often it's just synchronized fear. The group laughs at the same jokes, repeats the same opinions, follows the same outrage cycle, and calls it unity. It feels like belonging, but it's obedience wearing friendly clothes. History is full of terrible decisions made by good people who didn't want to be the only one raising a hand. Conformity thrives on silence, not belief. You tell yourself it's not worth the argument, but every unspoken doubt feeds the illusion that everyone else agrees. You don't have to be loud to be free. You just have to think honestly in a room that rewards dishonesty. The courage to dissent is lonely, but it's sacred, because truth, by its nature, begins with one person willing to see differently. Take a breath, and remember this. Agreement isn't virtue and conflict isn't sin. You don't owe anyone your alignment. You owe them your authenticity. And yet, authenticity is hard to hold in a world that rewards the opposite, because people will always flatter what they want to control. The manipulator's mirror. Flattery is the softest form of manipulation. It feels warm, affirming, addictive. It makes you drop your guard faster than fear ever could. You think you're being appreciated, but often you're being studied. The skilled manipulator doesn't demand. They reflect. They mirror your desires, your fears, your vanity. They become who you wish they were. And in that reflection, you lose sight of your own reflection. You start trusting them not because they're genuine, but because they make you feel seen. Flattery works because it weaponizes your longing for validation. The words sound kind, but the intent is control. The manipulator doesn't need to lie. They only need to agree. You do the rest. None of us are immune. Everyone wants to be admired, respected, understood. But awareness changes the game. When someone praises you, listen for the rhythm beneath their words. Does it liberate you or hook you? The difference is subtle, but it's everything. The cure for manipulation isn't suspicion. It's self-knowledge. When you already understand your worth, flattery becomes unnecessary. You stop needing mirrors because you've already met yourself. And once you stop falling for manipulation, you uncover a quieter truth. You were never really afraid of control. You were afraid of being disliked. The fear of being disliked, there's a hidden exhaustion that comes from trying to be likable. You edit yourself mid-sentence, adjust opinions to the room, soften your edges to fit the mold, and the whole time, a question hums beneath the surface. What if they don't like me? But what if they don't? The truth is, not everyone will. Some people will misunderstand you, project onto you, even despise you for no reason that makes sense. And that's not a problem to solve. It's a law of nature. We think being disliked means we've failed, but often it means we've stopped pretending. The more authentic you become, the fewer rooms you'll fit into, and that's how you find the ones that truly belong to you. Trying to please everyone is emotional poverty. You trade depth for acceptance, authenticity for applause. People who fear disapproval never experience real love, only conditional tolerance. Take a quiet moment to reflect on who you disappoint just by being honest. That pain you feel? It's the sound of the mask cracking. And underneath that crack, a new kind of freedom starts to breathe. Because the moment you stop fearing disapproval, you stop needing permission to exist. And then you see why so many people surrender that freedom so easily to authority. The seduction of authority. Authority offers something irresistible: relief from responsibility. It tells you what to think, how to act, who to trust. It trades your uncertainty for the illusion of order. And most people, weary from the chaos of choice, accept the deal without reading the fine print. Obedience feels safe. It simplifies life. But every time you let someone else do your thinking, you weaken the muscle of discernment. You start mistaking confidence for truth, charisma for wisdom, force for strength. Power loves followers who crave simplicity. The leader doesn't have to be right, only convincing. History remembers their speeches, not their intentions. You don't have to be rebellious to resist authority. You just have to stay awake, to question even what feels certain, to remember that power's greatest trick is convincing you that surrender is virtue. True authority, the kind worth trusting, invites thought, not obedience. It educates rather than commands. But the false kind, it thrives on conformity and fear. Take a deep breath. Notice where in your life you've let someone else think for you. Family, institutions, leaders, algorithms. Reclaim that space. It's the birthplace of freedom. And yet, even once you free yourself from power's grip, you face a subtler trap, the one you build yourself, made of pretending. The weight of masks. We all wear masks. Some are necessary: the polite face, the professional tone, the calm composure that keeps the world from collapsing into chaos. But wear them too long, and you forget the contours of your real face beneath. Pretending is a survival skill. You play roles to belong, to protect, to function. But every role has weight. Each smile that isn't real, each agreement that hides resentment, these things accumulate, slowly, invisibly, until one day you feel heavy without knowing why. You can feel it in your voice when it starts to tremble at honesty. You can feel it in your chest when silence feels like suffocation. The weight isn't other people, it's the layers you've added to stay acceptable. Taking off the mask isn't a dramatic act. It's a gradual unlearning. It's choosing truth in small doses until it feels natural again. You'll lose people. You'll confuse some. But you'll breathe deeper than you have in years. The world teaches you that vulnerability is weakness. But masks don't protect you from pain. They just delay it. And the longer you hide, the less real life feels. Take one deep breath for every mask you've worn today. Then let it go, not all at once, but enough to remember what your own skin feels like. Because authenticity is lighter than pretending. And when you finally shed the disguise, the next chapter begins, not about others, but about the personal price of becoming more than who you were. The pain of self-awareness. Awareness feels like light, but it burns before it warms. The first time you see yourself clearly, it's rarely beautiful. You notice how often you lie, how deeply you avoid, how easily you drift toward comfort. It's tempting to close your eyes again, but once awareness arrives, it refuses to leave. There's a loneliness in seeing truth. Others don't. You begin to recognize patterns, masks, habits, yours and theirs. You can't return to ignorance, and you can't always explain what you've learned. Growth isolates before it unites. Awareness doesn't give you peace. It gives you choices. It hands you the raw material of change and asks, what will you do with it? Most people stop there. They know, but they don't act. They prefer the pain of insight to the pain of transformation. Sit with that difference for a moment. Knowing is safe. Doing is exposure, but life only rewards the brave enough to follow awareness with action. Self-awareness is the mirror and the knife. It shows you what to heal and gives you the courage to start cutting away what doesn't belong. Growth begins the moment denial ends. And the moment you try to grow, you collide with a paradox. Change demands that part of you must die for the rest to live. The paradox of change. We romanticize transformation, but in practice it feels like loss. You say you want to grow, yet every improvement requires a funeral. Old habits, identities, friendships, all must be shed to make room for what's next. You can't climb while clinging to the ground. Change doesn't ask for permission. It demands surrender. You outgrow versions of yourself that once felt permanent. The clothes don't fit. The music doesn't move you. The conversations feel distant. It's not arrogance, it's evolution. But evolution always leaves ghosts. There's a grief that comes with progress. The people who loved your old self might not love the new one. The comfort you once cherished starts to feel like confinement. It's the cost of movement. Everything stable becomes unstable. But within that collapse, something sacred stirs. Growth doesn't destroy. It rearranges. It tears down walls only to reveal rooms you didn't know existed. Take a slow breath and remember, discomfort isn't punishment. It's birth pain. You can't become new without letting the old crumble. And sometimes the first thing to break is your need to be liked. The necessity of rejection. Being disliked hurts, but it's proof you've stopped performing. When you start choosing truth over harmony, people fall away, some because they no longer benefit, others because your clarity exposes what they still avoid. Either way, rejection becomes a filter. It removes those who only loved your silence. We're taught that rejection equals failure, that belonging is the ultimate prize, but forced belonging is worse than solitude. When you no longer fear being disliked, you become dangerous in the best way. Because honesty replaces diplomacy, conviction replaces compliance. Every no you receive teaches you the boundary of someone else's comfort, but every no you give teaches you the strength of your own. There is dignity in not fitting in knowing that some rooms require shrinking to enter. Rejection is life's way of redirecting you toward authenticity. It's a test of integrity disguised as loss. So let people misunderstand you. Let them leave. What remains afterward is truer than anything you could have kept by pretending. And as you protect that truth, another lesson follows, the realization that freedom always comes at a price, especially when you start drawing lines. The price of boundaries. Boundaries sound like freedom, but they begin with conflict. The first time you say no, it feels like betrayal, especially to people who've grown comfortable with your compliance. You start to see how many relationships were built on your silence. Every new boundary is an earthquake in an old landscape. But boundaries aren't walls. They're definitions. They say, this is me, and that is you. Without them, love becomes consumption, not connection. You start confusing sacrifice with care, exhaustion with loyalty. The irony is that people who truly love you won't be angered by your boundaries. They'll feel safer because of them. Only those who benefit from your absence will resent your presence. It's hard at first. You'll be called selfish, cold, distant. But boundaries aren't cruelty. They're honesty. They prevent quiet resentment from rotting your kindness. A boundary isn't a rejection of others. It's a declaration of self-respect. Pause and feel how much energy you've spent managing other people's comfort. Imagine what would happen if you redirected that energy into building your life instead. Freedom always angers the dependent, but that's how you learn who was connected to you and who was only feeding from you. Because every new boundary eventually forces a death, the death of the version of you who never had them. The death of the old self. There's a moment in real transformation that feels like dying. You stop recognizing yourself. The habits that once defined you lose their meaning. The desires you used to chase now feel foreign. You start grieving not a person but a pattern. The old rhythm of who you used to be. Most people run back to the familiar when this moment comes. They mistake disorientation for danger, but it's not danger. It's rebirth. When the old self collapses, it feels like emptiness because identity hasn't yet caught up to evolution. You're between lives, one ending, one beginning. Let yourself mourn it. The self you're burying served a purpose. It got you here, but it can't take you further. Gratitude and grief can coexist. That's the paradox of healing. You must love what you're leaving behind, even as you let it die. Take a quiet breath. Feel how heavy the shell has become. And now imagine stepping out of it, bare and trembling, but real. Transformation isn't glamorous. It's raw, lonely, and holy. The old self dies screaming, but the new one is born whispering. And that whisper leads to the next trial, the fire that tempers what remains. Discipline. The fire of discipline. Discipline doesn't look like glory. It looks like repetition. It's waking up when it's easier to stay asleep. It's showing up when no one notices. It's doing the same small thing over and over until it becomes who you are. Motivation feels good, but discipline builds gods out of mortals. The world romanticizes freedom but forgets that real freedom is structure mastered. You can't create art without form, strength without training, peace without order. Chaos might feel thrilling for a moment, but it always collapses under its own weight. Discipline is what keeps the structure standing when inspiration leaves. You'll hate it sometimes. You'll feel trapped inside your own standards. But that cage you're building, it's made of gold. It's the framework that protects you from your weaker impulses. The disciplined person isn't less free. They're the only one truly free because they've mastered the one thing no one else can control themselves. Take a moment to breathe and imagine how your life would look if you honored promises to yourself as fiercely as you do for others. Discipline isn't punishment, it's devotion. It's saying, I'm worth the effort. And when you learn to love the grind, boredom stops feeling like prison. It becomes practice. The beauty of boredom. Boredom terrifies most people because it forces them to feel time passing. We've built an entire culture around escaping it, scrolling, consuming, filling silence with noise. But boredom isn't the enemy. It's the doorway to depth. Every creative breakthrough, every meaningful insight was born in the quiet stretch between distractions. Boredom is the mind's way of begging for stillness so it can think again. But instead, we panic. We chase novelty, mistaking stimulation for fulfillment. Sit in your boredom for long enough, and it begins to transform. The mind starts to wander, not aimlessly, but inward. It rearranges, repairs, connects dots you didn't know existed. Boredom is the soil where imagination grows. You don't need constant excitement to feel alive. You need attention. Attention to breath, to texture, to the slow rhythm of moments that don't scream for your notice. So the next time boredom arrives, don't run. Watch what it reveals. It's a mirror for your inner restlessness, the proof that you've forgotten how to simply be. And once you remember, you start seeing effort differently, not as drudgery, but as the quiet language of purpose. The law of effort. Every result you admire was paid for in effort you didn't see. The success story, the talent, the mastery, they all hide hours of invisible struggle. In a world obsessed with shortcuts, effort is the last honest currency left. You can't cheat time, you can't trick the process. What you refuse to do, someone else is quietly doing, and one day you'll call it luck. Effort isn't glamorous, but it's what separates those who talk about dreams from those who live them. The law is simple. You get what you repeat, not what you imagine, not what you manifest, not what you promise. You become what you practice. And practice doesn't care about feelings. It cares about consistency. Take a moment and think about the life you say you want. Now compare it to the life you train for. That gap is where your future is decided. The universe isn't biased, it's transactional. It rewards motion. Effort doesn't guarantee success, but lack of it guarantees nothing. And in that tension lies a painful, necessary truth. Sometimes, even when you give everything, you still fail. And that's the lesson that teaches you most. The gift of failure. Failure feels like ending, but it's just instruction written in pain. It's the curriculum life saves for those brave enough to try. Success inflates the ego. Failure carves it into something humble enough to hold wisdom. The fall hurts, but it's the landing that shapes you. Failure strips away illusion. You see who supports you, who vanishes, what beliefs survive when nothing works. You meet yourself, not the version polished by achievement, but the raw, real one that still gets up afterward. That's the you worth trusting. Most people fear failure not because of the pain, but because of the witness. They're terrified someone will see them fall. But failure isn't humiliation. It's evidence you had the courage to begin. Take a deep breath. Think about your worst mistake. If you survived it, it wasn't final. It was formative. Every scar you carry is proof that life tested you and you stayed in the ring. That's honor, not shame. The only true failure is avoidance, the story you never lived because you were too afraid to write it. And if you keep walking, you'll realize something profound. There is no finish line. Every peak you reach only reveals another climb. The climb without a peak. We spend years chasing the summit, success, enlightenment, love, peace. We tell ourselves, once I get there, I'll rest. But when you finally arrive, you realize the horizon has moved again. There's no final peak. There's only the climb. The pursuit never ends because life isn't a problem to solve. It's a process to engage with. Meaning isn't found in achievement. It's found in motion. We think the goal is to finish, but the secret is to continue. The climbers who make it to the top don't celebrate the end. They look around and ask, what now? Because joy wasn't waiting at the summit. It was hidden in the struggle, the breathless ascent, the near falls, the quiet strength built along the way. Take a moment to think about how much of your life you've postponed for someday. That's the cruelest illusion. The moment you stop needing an ending, you start living. Growth never stops, and peace doesn't mean stillness. It means finding rhythm within the climb. You don't need to conquer the mountain. You need to become it. And when that realization settles, something soft follows. The striving quiets. The desperation fades. You stop needing constant proof of progress, because growth, it turns out, was never about reaching higher. It was about seeing clearer. The success illusion. Success is a mirage. You chase it for years, thinking it will fix everything. Your doubt, your loneliness, your restless hunger for meaning. You imagine a future version of yourself standing on some invisible summit, finally certain, finally satisfied. But when you arrive, the air is thinner, colder. The silence is louder than applause. No one warns you that success often feels like grief. You lose the hunger that once kept you alive. You stop running, and in the stillness, you hear how empty the noise was. The goals you once worshipped start to look small from above, and yet the feeling of completion never comes. Because success doesn't fill you, it magnifies what's already inside. If you were empty before, you'll be emptier after. Society sells success like salvation, but it's not a cure. It's exposure. It shows you that the ladder you've been climbing never ends, and the higher you go, the further you fall from simplicity. The reward isn't peace. It's perspective. You learn that achievement doesn't create worth. It only amplifies who you've become on the way there. Take a deep breath. Think of something you've longed for your whole life. Now imagine finally getting it and realizing nothing fundamental changes inside you. The scenery shifts, but the ache remains. That's when you understand success was never the destination. It was just another disguise for the longing to be whole. And once the illusion fades, you begin to see what success often hides, the hollow echo that follows every victory. The empty high. There's a strange silence after achievement. The project finishes, the deal closes, the applause fades. For a brief moment, everything feels light. Then the emptiness seeps in. You thought the summit would be peace, but it feels more like withdrawal. The mind, addicted to striving, doesn't know how to rest. This is the part few talk about, the emotional crash that follows accomplishment. You chase goals not just to win, but to silence the question, what now? And when the noise stops, that question echoes louder than ever. The empty high exposes the truth that ambition was never about the result. It was about escape. You were running from the quiet, from stillness, from yourself. Success only removed the distraction. It gave you everything except relief. There's no shame in the crash. It's simply the mind learning to exist without adrenaline. But if you misunderstand it, you'll start chasing again, believing the cure is more success. It isn't. The cure is meaning. And meaning doesn't come from the high. It comes from endurance, from choosing purpose over thrill. Sit for a moment in the aftermath of your last victory. Feel the echo fading. That hollow ache isn't failure. It's space. Space to build something deeper. Because once the high fades, you begin to sense the real curse of achievement, the endless hunger for more. The curse of more. More is the most dangerous word in the human language. It hides inside ambition, disguised as progress. More money, more recognition, more growth. It sounds noble, even productive. But more never ends. It devours satisfaction one bite at a time, leaving you too full to rest and too empty to stop eating. We weren't built for endless accumulation. The mind evolved for survival, not abundance. It doesn't know how to stop wanting once survival is guaranteed, so it invents new hungers, status, control, admiration, and calls them purpose. The curse of more is that it turns achievement into addiction. You can't celebrate what you have because it's already not enough. You can't rest because rest feels like loss. You become a prisoner of momentum, terrified that stopping means disappearing. Take a slow breath. Look at what you once prayed for that now feels ordinary. You worked for it, maybe bled for it, and now it barely registers. That's not ingratitude. That's human nature untrained. The only way to break the curse is to practice contentment as rebellion, gratitude as discipline, presence as defiance. More is not meaning. Meaning is found in enough, in the rare art of recognizing sufficiency in a world that profits from your dissatisfaction. But to learn that, you must confront the greatest lie of all, that reaching your goals means you've arrived. The goal mirage. You keep running toward the horizon, and it keeps moving. That's the cruel magic of goals. They create the illusion of direction while quietly ensuring you'll never feel complete. The closer you get, the further they shift. And yet without them, you feel lost. It's a paradox. Goals give life motion, but they steal its stillness. We're trained from childhood to measure life in milestones: graduate, succeed, marry, build, achieve. But what happens when you check every box? The story ends, and you're still here. You start setting new goals just to fill the silence, not out of purpose but out of fear, fear that without striving you'll vanish into meaninglessness. The tragedy is that the human spirit was never meant to live only for arrival. It was meant to experience the walk. The moment you believe happiness waits at the finish line, you guarantee you'll never reach it. Because happiness isn't at the end, it's hidden in the small, unnoticed places along the way. The smell of morning coffee, the relief of a deep breath, the laugh you didn't expect. Take a pause. Imagine walking without destination, not because you're lost, but because the road itself is home. That's the secret the horizon hides. You were never supposed to catch it. And once you stop chasing, you begin to see how the chase itself can become a prison, especially when what drives it isn't purpose anymore, but legacy. The pressure of legacy. Legacy is ambition's ghost. It whispers that success means nothing unless it lasts forever. It tempts you with the illusion of immortality, that if you leave enough behind, you'll never truly die. But legacy, like all human constructs, is fragile. Time erases names faster than history can record them. We want to be remembered, but even memory fades. Civilizations crumble. Art burns. Monuments sink into the earth. You can't outlast entropy. You can only contribute your verse while the song still plays. The pressure of legacy makes life heavy. You start crafting your story for others to read instead of living it. Every action becomes performance. Every decision a headline. You trade authenticity for architecture, building statues out of exhaustion. But legacy isn't about permanence, it's about resonance. It's not what survives you, it's what changes because of you. A kind word that alters a life. A piece of work that outlives its creator by one more heart. That's all you need. That's all you ever had. Sit with that thought. Feel the weight of what you're trying to prove and let it fall away. You were never meant to be eternal. You were meant to be real. And when you finally stop fighting to be remembered, you begin to understand the peace of those who no longer chase anything at all. Because what happens after success isn't triumph, it's a reckoning. And that's where the next lesson begins. The addiction to progress. You tell yourself you're growing, evolving, improving, but sometimes what you call progress is just restlessness wearing a noble name. The constant drive to move forward becomes a drug. You can't stop, because stopping feels like death. You check metrics, chase goals, fill silence with productivity. You don't rest. You pause only long enough to reload your anxiety. Progress is intoxicating because it feels like control. Each new milestone convinces you that chaos is tamed, but beneath the surface you know it isn't. The more you achieve, the less you can sit still. The high fades faster every time, and soon the only relief left is the next pursuit. This is the quiet tragedy of modern life. We've mistaken acceleration for evolution. We sprint through experiences instead of absorbing them. We grow older without actually growing deeper. Take a breath and notice how uncomfortable stillness feels. That's not laziness. That's withdrawal. Your nervous system has forgotten how to exist without constant input. But the soul doesn't evolve through speed. It matures through stillness, through integration, through silence. Progress without reflection isn't growth. It's motion sickness. Progress can be beautiful, but obsession with it makes you hollow. You don't need to keep climbing. Sometimes the lesson is to look around, to live the view you already earned. Because chasing endlessly only leads to the next fall. The fall after winning. Every victory carries a hidden collapse. When you finally get what you've been fighting for, there's a quiet unraveling inside you. The tension that fueled you dissolves, and with it, your direction. For so long, you were defined by pursuit. So who are you now that the chase is over? This is the fall after winning. It's not dramatic, it's invisible. You smile in photos, you celebrate with friends, but inside there's a stillness that feels more like absence than peace. The mountain you conquered now blocks your view of what's next. The fall isn't failure, it's gravity. Success pulls you upward, but every ascent carries exhaustion that must eventually descend. You can't stay on the peak forever. The air is too thin up there. You need to come down to live again. But most people panic at the descent. They chase new peaks before understanding the last one. They call it ambition, but it's fear. The fear of confronting life without the chase. Yet there's wisdom in the fall. It teaches humility, perspective, endurance. It forces you to rebuild identity on something deeper than accomplishment. Sit for a moment with this question. Who are you when the applause stops? If the answer scares you, that's the part of yourself asking to be met. And when you finally meet it, you discover that what you called purpose may have been performance all along. The betrayal of purpose. Purpose is worshipped like a god, but even gods disappoint. You spend years trying to find your purpose, as if meaning waits somewhere else, holding a sign with your name on it. But purpose isn't found, it's created, and the moment you create it, it starts evolving. That's the betrayal. What once gave your life direction can become a cage. The artist who no longer loves their art, the healer who burns out saving others, the teacher who forgets curiosity. The calling you once loved begins to consume you, demanding devotion long after the joy is gone. Purpose betrays you because it was never meant to be permanent. It's a stage of development, not a final truth. Every purpose has an expiration date. The tragedy is that people cling to theirs out of fear. They confuse change with betrayal, when in reality, refusing to evolve is the betrayal. Take a breath and ask yourself, does your purpose still fit, or are you just afraid to admit it doesn't? It's okay to outgrow even the things that once saved you. Purpose isn't a crown you wear forever. It's a torch you pass to the next version of yourself. When you stop clinging to old purpose, you make space for something lighter, something closer to peace. But first, you must face the shadow cast by success itself, admiration. The shadow of admiration. Admiration feels pure, but it's dangerous. The moment others admire you, they stop seeing you, and you start performing for them. Every compliment becomes a quiet command to stay the same. You start repeating yourself to remain lovable. You mistake applause for connection and expectation for identity. The crowd doesn't want your truth. They want your consistency. They want the version of you that comforts them, not the one that's changing. So you learn to curate yourself, to hide the parts that contradict the brand of who they think you are. But every mask, even a beautiful one, suffocates in time. Admiration traps both sides. The admirer stops growing because they worship. The admired stops growing because they fear disappointing the worshiper. And both forget they're human. There's only one way out of that prison: to risk being misunderstood again, to evolve publicly, to let people down so you can stand up straighter. You'll lose followers, attention, maybe even love, but you'll regain oxygen. You'll remember what it feels like to breathe in truth, even when the air is thin. Take a slow breath. Remember, admiration isn't evil. It's just a mirror. The problem isn't being seen. It's being frozen. When you stop performing for the eyes watching you, you finally glimpse what's beyond the spotlight, the quiet reward no applause can touch. The real reward. The real reward isn't money, fame, or admiration. It's peace. Peace is what success was secretly trying to buy you all along. But you can't purchase peace. You can only cultivate it. It arrives when striving ends, when the inner war quiets, when you stop needing the world to confirm your worth. Peace is subtle. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It hums. It breathes. It feels like a deep exhale after years of running. You realize you don't need to prove anything anymore, not because you've won, but because you've stopped competing. Peace isn't laziness. It's mastery. It's the point where you no longer need to chase every opportunity, because you finally trust what's meant for you will find you. It's where silence stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like presence. Take a deep breath right now and notice how rare stillness has become. The reward isn't the destination. It's the ability to sit in the middle of your life without needing it to be different. When you finally reach that place, you see success for what it really was: a bridge, not a home. And crossing that bridge leads you somewhere deeper, beyond ambition, into understanding others and the hidden laws that govern human nature itself. The law of self-interest. Every act of kindness, generosity, or sacrifice, look closely enough, and somewhere beneath it you'll find a seed of self-interest. That doesn't make it evil. It makes it human. Every creature, from ant to emperor, moves according to the same silent law: to preserve itself, to extend itself, to matter. Even the saint who gives everything away still gains something: the feeling of meaning, the relief of purpose, the illusion of purity. We love to believe in pure motives because it softens the world. It lets us trust blindly, love recklessly, hope without calculation. But purity is rare, maybe impossible. The friend who comforts you gains validation for being needed. The parent who sacrifices gains identity through care. The lover who adores you gains the warmth of being adored. Every exchange feeds both sides, even when one seems selfless. Recognizing this isn't cynicism, it's maturity. When you understand self-interest, you stop expecting perfection from people. You learn to read what they need, not just what they say. And once you do, compassion becomes clearer, not colder. Because when you see others' motives, you stop taking betrayal so personally. Take a moment to think of someone who disappointed you. Was it malice or just survival? We all serve the law of self-interest. Some obey it unconsciously, others consciously. The trick is to align your interests with truth so that what serves you also serves the world. When you accept that, the world becomes less cruel and far more predictable. And predictability is what you need next, because the idea of pure intention is about to fall apart. The myth of pure intentions. We tell ourselves stories about good and evil, heroes and villains, but intentions aren't that clean. People hurt others with the best intentions all the time. A parent controls their child for their own good. A friend hides the truth to protect your feelings. A leader justifies destruction for a higher cause. Intentions are easy to worship because they absolve us of outcome. They let us sleep through the damage we cause. Pure intention is the halo we put on our selfishness to make it shine. We rarely act out of total altruism. We act out of complex mixtures: fear, pride, hope, guilt, even love. The purest force we name often hides a need to possess, to be seen, to belong. And yet, this complexity doesn't make love false. It makes it alive. If you wait to act until your motives are perfect, you'll do nothing. The goal isn't purity, it's awareness. To know when your good deed hides ego. To admit when your generosity carries a secret agenda. That awareness keeps morality honest. Take a breath and think of something noble you've done. Now whisper the selfish benefit beneath it. It doesn't cancel the act, it completes it. You are light and shadow both. Pretending otherwise is what leads to hypocrisy. The world doesn't need perfect hearts. It needs transparent ones. And once you start seeing intentions as shades rather than absolutes, you begin to notice how fragile trust truly is, because it depends on believing in purity that rarely exists. The fragility of trust. Trust takes years to build and seconds to break because it's built on imagination. You trust someone not because you've seen their soul, but because you've filled in the parts you can't see with hope. You project reliability onto them like paint onto a blank wall. And when they act outside that painting, even once the illusion shatters. We crave trust because uncertainty is unbearable, but trust is not certainty. It's risk chosen willingly. Every "I trust you" is a leap across a void, hoping the other person will catch you instead of stepping aside. That's why betrayal hurts. It's not just loss of safety, it's the collapse of belief. And yet, you can't live without trust. Total suspicion is a prison. The answer isn't to stop trusting. It's to trust realistically, to remember that people are unpredictable systems of need, fear, and habit, not characters written for your comfort. When you trust, you're not guaranteeing safety, you're accepting potential pain. But that pain is what makes love possible. Without vulnerability, connection becomes transaction. Take a slow breath. Recall the last person who betrayed you. They didn't break trust, they revealed its nature. Trust is always fragile, because humans are always changing. And once you accept that, you begin to see generosity differently, not as selfless, but as a dance between giving and taking, with hidden motives beneath every gesture. The hidden motives of generosity. Generosity wears a holy face. We praise the giver, idolize sacrifice, tell stories of saints who give without asking anything back. But true selflessness is almost mythical. Behind nearly every gift lies a motive, some conscious, some buried. Sometimes we give to feel useful, sometimes to gain approval, sometimes to control through gratitude. Even the smallest act of giving rearranges power. The giver gains moral height, the receiver becomes indebted. That's why generosity can turn toxic. It binds instead of freeing. But generosity isn't evil. It's elemental. We need it to survive. The danger isn't in giving. It's in pretending it's pure. When you admit that giving feeds you too, the act becomes honest. You stop resenting the lack of gratitude. You stop keeping score. You give because giving aligns with who you want to be, not because it guarantees return. The most beautiful form of generosity expects nothing, but it still receives something: peace. The the joy of being congruent, of seeing need and answering it without story. That's what separates compassion from manipulation. Pause here and think of the last time you gave something away. Time, attention, forgiveness. What did you hope to get back? Approval, relief, clarity? Whatever it was, acknowledge it. Honesty cleanses generosity. Denial corrupts it. And once you can look generosity in the eye without illusion, you're ready to face its darkest shadow, the betrayal that always arrives from the direction you least expect. The betrayal you'll never see coming. Betrayal never comes from your enemies. It comes from the ones you defended, the ones you trusted, the ones whose voices could calm you in seconds. Strangers can hurt you, but only those you've let close can truly wound you. That's what makes betrayal sacred. It breaks you open where love once lived. You never see it coming because you project your integrity onto them. You assume they think like you, value like you, love like you, but people act according to their fears, not your faith. The betrayal isn't personal. It's just their self-interest colliding with your hope. At first you'll feel anger so bright it burns through reason, then grief, then emptiness. You'll replay every conversation, every sign you ignored, as if logic could rewrite the past. But betrayal's lesson isn't clarity, it's humility. It reminds you that no one belongs to you. Not their loyalty, not their love, not even their honesty. The real pain of betrayal is discovering how much of yourself you gave away without protection. But that's also the beginning of wisdom, because the heart that's been betrayed learns the difference between attachment and connection. Attachment clings, connection flows. Take a long breath. Think of the person who broke your trust. Feel the ache, but don't harden around it. The wound will close on its own, but if you armor it too tightly, you'll carry their shadow forever. Betrayal teaches the final lesson of human nature. Everyone is capable of anything, including you. That knowledge isn't bitterness, it's awareness. And with awareness comes a strange kind of peace, because you stop expecting perfection and start building your strength where it belongs, inside. The narcissism trap. Narcissism isn't just a diagnosis, it's a mirror we all glance into. Everyone wants to be seen, remembered, admired. We crave significance like oxygen, and when the world doesn't offer it, we start manufacturing it. The narcissist is simply what happens when that hunger never finds satisfaction. At its core, narcissism is fear, fear of being ordinary, invisible, forgettable. It builds a false self out of reflection, living off the gaze of others. Every compliment is fuel. Every silence, starvation. The narcissist isn't in love with themselves. They're addicted to attention. Without it, they disappear. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This trap exists in all of us. The world we've built, social media, comparison, self-branding, feeds it daily. The difference between confidence and vanity has blurred. We've confused validation with existence. The like button became the mirror we kneel before. It's easy to hate the narcissist. Harder to admit how much we resemble them. Every time you exaggerate for praise, every time you chase admiration more than authenticity, you step closer to that same hollow hunger. And it never ends, because no amount of admiration can fill a self built on illusion. The only cure for narcissism isn't rejection, it's humility, the quiet willingness to be unseen, unpraised, yet whole. Try disappearing for a while. No posts, no announcements, no performance, just presence. Feel how rare that is, to exist without needing witness. That's where the real self hides, beneath the noise, waiting to be enough without applause. And once you learn to see without being seen, you start noticing how envy poisons even the best parts of you. The mirror of envy. Envy is the wound you pretend not to have. It disguises itself as indifference, as critique, as disdain. You tell yourself you don't care, but you do, because envy is attention that refuses to admit admiration. It's the shadow cast by desire denied. We envy those who reflect the parts of ourselves still unlived. The friend who's bold when we're cautious. the artist who creates what we only imagine, the stranger whose peace reminds us how restless we are. Envy isn't hatred. It's longing twisted into bitterness. The tragedy is that envy kills gratitude. It shifts focus from what's growing to what's missing. You stop watering your own garden because you're staring at someone else's harvest. And soon, you convince yourself that life has cheated you, when in truth, you've simply stopped showing up for your own potential. Take a deep breath. Think of the person who stirs envy in you. Now ask yourself, not what do they have, but what do they awaken? Envy, when seen honestly, is a compass. It points toward desire, not sin. It shows you what you secretly want to become. But instead of following it, you compare, and comparison turns that map into poison. The way out is humility and curiosity. Let envy reveal what you're ready to grow into. Admire instead of resent. Because envy unexamined becomes hypocrisy, and hypocrisy, in its quiet way, corrodes the soul. The cycle of hypocrisy. We hate in others what we secretly fear in ourselves. That's why hypocrisy is universal. It's the price of being human. You preach patience, then snap in anger. You talk about honesty, then hide what hurts. You condemn pride while secretly hoping for recognition. It's not because you're insincere. It's because awareness always runs ahead of behavior. We hold ideals higher than our ability to live them. We know what's right long before we can embody it. Hypocrisy, in this sense, isn't failure. It's friction. It's the tension between who we are and who we want to be. The danger isn't in being a hypocrite. It's in denying that you are one. Once you admit your contradictions, they lose their sting. You stop preaching purity and start practicing forgiveness. You become less judgmental, not because you approve of flaws, but because you recognize yourself in them. The loudest moralists are often those fleeing their own reflection. That's why outrage feels so addictive. It drowns guilt in virtue. But outrage without introspection is theater, not ethics. Pause for a moment and think of the last thing you condemned. Ask yourself honestly, is there a piece of that inside you? If the answer is yes, don't flinch. That's the doorway to understanding. Because the more you deny your shadow, the more it controls you, and when shadows unite, they create something dangerous, the crowd. The crowd's conscience. Morality dissolves in groups. A single person can feel guilt. A crowd can feel nothing. The same people who would never harm alone will cheer cruelty when it's shared. The chant, the cause, the outrage, all of it gives permission to act without reflection. That's how the conscience erodes, through diffusion. In a crowd, responsibility blurs. You don't feel like I, you feel like we, and we can justify almost anything. History's worst crimes were collective, not individual. One person lights the fire, but 1,000 stand around it, warming their hands. The crowd offers belonging, and belonging is addictive. It removes the burden of thought. You don't have to ask what's true, you just have to chant louder than your doubt. But that comfort has a cost, individuality. You start absorbing the moral tone of the group, losing the quiet voice that once told you when something felt wrong. Take a slow breath. Think of the last time you agreed just to belong. The last time silence felt easier than honesty. That's how it starts. Small compromises that feel harmless until they aren't. You don't need to be brave every time. Just once in a while, you need to stay human in the room that's forgotten how. Crowds aren't evil. They're empty. They amplify whatever fills them. And in a world full of noise, the only moral act left might be kindness, but even kindness without boundaries can destroy. The kindness paradox. We're taught that kindness is always good, always noble. But kindness without discernment isn't virtue, it's surrender. You can't heal people who use their wounds as weapons. You can't love someone into integrity. And yet we keep trying because it feels cruel not to. We mistake enabling for empathy. Kindness has limits because dignity has limits. The soft heart must learn sharp edges, or it will bleed itself dry. The goal isn't to become hard, it's to become wise, to know when kindness helps and when it hides cowardice. Every act of compassion must be paired with clarity. Otherwise, you confuse martyrdom for love. You forgive before accountability, comfort before understanding, rescue before respect. That's not kindness. It's fear of conflict dressed as goodness. Pause and reflect on who benefits most from your kindness. If the answer is always them, never you, then it's not generosity, it's dependency. Real kindness nourishes both sides. It protects truth while offering grace. To be kind in a cruel world is brave. To stay kind without losing yourself is divine. Because soft hearts are only powerful when they're also strong. And when the world teaches you to harden, but you choose to stay human anyway, you've already begun the rebellion that leads to freedom. The courage to be hated. Everyone says they want freedom, until freedom demands being disliked. You can't live authentically without stepping on someone's expectations. Every choice that's truly yours will unsettle someone who built their comfort around your compliance. The question isn't whether people will judge you. They already do. The question is whether you'll let their judgment dictate your life. We grow up conditioned to avoid disapproval. It's woven into us since childhood. Smile, behave, fit in. The urge to please becomes reflex, but each time you silence your truth to protect someone else's comfort, you chip away at your own spirit. The courage to be hated isn't arrogance, it's honesty refusing to kneel. You can love people deeply and still disappoint them. You can be kind without being compliant. The truth is, everyone who ever made a difference was disliked by someone who needed the world to stay small. Rejection isn't proof you're wrong, it's proof you've stopped performing. Take a slow breath and feel the weight of every opinion you've carried that isn't yours. Let it drop. You don't need to be universally loved, you need to be real. Freedom begins where approval ends. And once you stop fearing the loss of others' affection, you discover the most underrated power of all, the power to walk away. The power of withdrawal. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. When you withdraw, not in anger but in clarity, you break the pattern of dependence that others feed on. The world teaches you to chase resolution, to explain, to fix, but not every connection deserves closure. Some only deserve distance. Walking away isn't weakness, it's precision. It's recognizing when the cost of engagement exceeds the value of connection. You can't heal where you're constantly drained. You can't think clearly while drowning in noise. Withdrawal isn't escape, it's alignment. We mistake presence for strength, but staying can be cowardice. The strongest act is often the quietest exit. You stop begging people to understand your boundaries and start enforcing them by absence. Absence that says, I see what this is and I choose peace over proof. Take a moment to think about the last time you stayed somewhere long after your energy left. How much of you did you trade for the illusion of belonging? You're allowed to end chapters without apologies. You're allowed to disappear to protect what's sacred inside you. Power doesn't always shout, it walks away. And once you reclaim that silence, solitude stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like home. The virtue of solitude. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's unfiltered reality. When the world goes quiet, you meet yourself without decoration. The silence becomes a mirror showing you everything you ignore in the noise. The ache beneath your ambition, the fatigue behind your kindness, the questions that never got answers. It's unnerving at first. But solitude isn't emptiness, it's space. In solitude, you stop performing. There's no audience to applaud or condemn you. You see what remains when approval disappears. That's identity, stripped bare. Most people avoid solitude because they fear their own reflection. But the self is like a lake. The surface only clears when it's still. Solitude refines you. It teaches independence not from others, but from the need for others. You start liking your own company. You stop chasing validation because you realize how quiet self-acceptance feels and how addictive that calm can be. The irony is that once you're comfortable being alone, you attract people who value your presence rather than need it. Pause here. Notice how often you fill silence out of habit. Let this moment expand without sound. That peace you feel, that's you, unfiltered. The world calls it loneliness, but it's really sovereignty. And in that sovereignty, you learn the next lesson, the necessity of silence itself. The necessity of silence. Silence is the rarest luxury in a world addicted to noise. Everywhere you go, something demands your attention, the endless hum of conversations, screens, alerts, opinions. The world never stops shouting, and the more noise there is, the less you hear yourself. Silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of awareness. It's the stillness that allows truth to surface without interference. When you learn to sit in silence, you begin hearing what's been whispering all along: intuition, grief, longing, peace. They've been waiting for you under the static. Silence is medicine for a restless mind, but at first it feels like withdrawal. You'll itch to check your phone, to fill the air with words, to prove your relevance. But once you survive that discomfort, silence becomes sacred. You realize it doesn't erase connection. It deepens it. You start speaking less, but meaning more. Take a deep breath and listen to what your environment sounds like right now. Notice how much you've been missing by always reaching for the next distraction. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. And when you spend enough time inside it, you start rebelling against every expectation that once defined you, because now you finally have the space to hear what you actually want. The rebellion against expectations. Rebellion doesn't always look like fire. It can look like peace. You don't have to destroy the world to free yourself from it. You only have to stop obeying its unspoken rules. How success should look, how happiness should sound, how love should behave. The world gives you scripts. Rebellion begins when you start editing them. Expectations are invisible prisons. They tell you who to be before you even begin. Most people never notice the bars. They decorate them with achievements, relationships, reputations, but the cage remains. You call it stability. It's really obedience. The quiet rebel doesn't rage. They simply stop pretending. They stop apologizing for choosing differently. They disappoint people strategically. They risk misunderstanding for the sake of authenticity. That's not defiance. It's alignment. Pause here and think of all the expectations that live inside your mind, but not inside your truth. Whose approval are you still chasing? What version of yourself exists only because the world rewarded it? Let it go. You don't owe the world your conformity. You owe it your honesty. The rebellion isn't against society. It's against your own conditioning. And when you free yourself from expectation, the next form of liberation arrives, the sacred power of saying no. The liberation of saying no. Saying no is an act of rebellion in a world built on obligation. You're taught from birth to be agreeable, to comply, to please, to nod even when your heart says stop. Every yes that wasn't meant fractures you a little. Every time you betray your own boundaries for harmony, you teach the world how to use you. No is the sound of reclaiming yourself. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. When you say no, you remind others that your time, your energy, your attention are sacred currencies. They are not to be spent carelessly. Every time you refuse something that doesn't align with you, you make space for something that does. The hardest part isn't saying it. It's surviving what follows. The sighs, the disappointment, the sudden withdrawal of warmth. People who benefit from your silence will call your boundaries selfish. They will mistake your honesty for hostility because your obedience once served their comfort. But love built on compliance isn't love, it's control. Saying no isn't rejection, it's refinement. It shapes your circle into people who understand that mutual respect is not negotiation. It filters out manipulation disguised as affection. The word no is small, but it echoes. It changes the acoustics of your life. Suddenly what's left is quieter, but real. Take a slow breath and think of how many times you said yes when you wanted to scream no. Each of those yeses cost you a little of your peace. Now imagine what it would feel like to live without that debt, to belong only to your truth. Saying no doesn't burn bridges, it simply lights the ones that lead back to yourself. And once you learn that, you begin mastering the most sacred art of all, the art of loving without chains. The discipline of detachment. Love becomes suffering the moment you forget where you end and others begin. You think attachment is connection, but attachment is ownership in disguise. It's the attempt to hold still what is meant to move, to preserve people, moments, and feelings as if they were possessions. But everything living changes, and detachment is learning to love anyway. Detachment doesn't mean coldness, it means presence without control. You stop demanding permanence from impermanent things. You stop clinging to people to validate your worth. You let others breathe, and in that space, love deepens instead of decays. It takes immense discipline to stay open while allowing freedom. The ego wants security. The heart wants truth. Detachment is what reconciles them. It teaches the heart to love fully and the ego to let go gracefully. You begin to see that what's truly yours never needs to be held with force. If someone can walk away, let them. If something fades, bless it. Detachment doesn't shrink your capacity to care, it purifies it. When you stop gripping, you stop bleeding. You realize that love is not meant to cage you, it's meant to expand you. The greatest act of loyalty is allowing others to follow their own path, even if it leads away from you. Sit quietly for a moment and think about who or what you're still holding on to out of fear. Ask yourself, if I release this, what might return on its own? The things meant for you never need to be chased. They need to be recognized. And when you start living like that, you learn the next lesson, how to truly let go. The art of letting go. Letting go isn't a single act. It's a slow unraveling. You don't wake up one morning detached. You wake up one morning and realize you've stopped rehearsing what you'll say, stopped refreshing the page, stopped reliving the pain. Letting go happens quietly, in the spaces where you stop feeding what once consumed you. The mind hates letting go because it craves closure, and closure is rarely given, it's chosen. You wait for explanations that never come, apologies that never arrive, justice that never unfolds. But life doesn't promise resolution. It offers release instead. And release is not forgetting. It's remembering without tension. Letting go is surrender without resentment. It's saying, this hurt, but it doesn't define me. This mattered, but it doesn't own me. It's walking forward even while the past calls your name. Sometimes letting go feels like betrayal, especially when what you're releasing once gave you meaning. But clinging to what's dead is a slow form of decay. The hand that refuses to open eventually forgets how to hold what's new. You can't receive while you're still gripping ghosts. So forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Forgiveness isn't reconciliation, it's detox. It drains the venom without pretending the snake never bit. Take a breath and picture the moment you stop trying to rewrite what's over. That was the moment you came back to life. Letting go isn't loss, it's liberation. It's remembering that the story goes on without the characters who chose to stop reading with you. And once you free yourself from what's gone, you start losing interest in chasing what everyone else is still chasing. The fear of missing out. FOMO is the modern sickness of a restless soul. It thrives on the belief that life is happening somewhere else. Some other city, some other relationship, some other version of you. You scroll through highlights, mistaking glimpses for truth. Everyone seems happier, richer, freer. But the truth is simpler and sadder. No one feels whole all the time, not even the people you envy. FOMO is born from the illusion of scarcity. You think joy is limited, that if someone else has it, there's less for you. So you chase experiences like they're running out, forgetting that meaning doesn't live in variety, It lives in depth. You can visit every place, meet every person, achieve every dream, and still feel hollow if you're never fully present where you are. The cure for FOMO isn't more, it's less. It's learning to taste the richness of the moment you're already in. When you stop looking over your shoulder, you realize the life you wanted isn't somewhere else. It's unfolding quietly where you stand. Take a moment and think of how often you escape the present for the illusion of possibility. The mind that fears missing out never notices what it already has. What if you stopped chasing the world and let it come to you? What if you allowed peace to be the thing you didn't miss out on? FOMO fades the moment gratitude takes its place. And gratitude, once it becomes habit, transforms desire into stillness. That stillness isn't emptiness, it's power. The power of less. Having less is not deprivation, it's liberation. Every object, every commitment, every digital tether pulls a thread of your attention. The more you accumulate, the less of you remains. Minimalism isn't about owning nothing. It's about being owned by nothing. We fill our lives with noise because silence feels like absence. We chase possessions because emptiness feels like failure. But simplicity reveals what was buried under excess: space for meaning, time for creation, energy for living deliberately. To live with less is to live with clarity. You start noticing the small things that abundance made invisible: the sound of footsteps, the taste of morning, the softness of your own breath. These details were never gone. They were just drowned out. Reducing doesn't just clear space, it clears illusion. You realize how much you were buying just to distract from loneliness or fear or the feeling of never being enough. The emptier your shelves, the quieter your mind becomes. And from that quiet, gratitude begins to speak. Take a slow breath. Imagine your life stripped to essentials. No noise, no clutter, only what truly adds meaning. What would remain? Who would remain? You'd find not loss, but relief. Because simplicity isn't sacrifice, it's sovereignty. The less you need, the harder you are to control. The power of less isn't poverty, it's precision. It's the art of needing only what aligns with your soul. And when you learn that, you're ready for the next awakening, the confrontation with time and mortality, where every illusion finally breaks. The countdown you ignore. Every life is a countdown, but most people pretend the clock isn't ticking. You feel time passing in vague ways. The seasons change, birthdays stack, faces age, but you never really feel the number shrinking. You plan, you postpone, you say someday as if someday were guaranteed. Yet each morning arrives with one less sunrise waiting ahead. We live as if we're immortal until reality taps us on the shoulder with loss. A sudden death, a diagnosis, a moment of silence long enough for awareness to enter, and suddenly the illusion shatters. The truth is simple and unkind. You will die, and you don't know when. Everything you're putting off depends on the assumption that you'll have time. One day that assumption expires. Most people avoid this truth, but the brave sit with it. They don't wallow in fear, they use it as focus. Memento mori. Remember you must die, isn't morbid, it's medicine. It purifies priorities. It strips away nonsense. The trivial melts under the heat of what truly matters. Every tick of the clock is a quiet mercy. It reminds you to stop waiting for permission, to write the book, to say you love them, to forgive, to start. Time doesn't take, it trades. It gives you this second right now in exchange for one you'll never get back. Pause for a breath. Feel the invisible clock continuing to count, that soundless rhythm you sense behind everything. That's the universe whispering, "Don't waste me." And once you start listening, you realize how little of the present actually belongs to you. The vanishing present. The present moment is slippery. You try to hold it, and it slides through your fingers like water. You plan for tomorrow while replaying yesterday, missing the quiet miracle happening between the two. The human mind wasn't built for now. It was built for navigation, for survival. But in surviving, we forgot how to exist. Each instant dies the moment it's born. You can't live in it. You can only witness it, passing. And yet, that's where life truly happens, in the tiny dissolving frames between what was and what will be. We rush past them like they're irrelevant, yet they're all we ever really have. The tragedy is that we treat the present as a bridge to somewhere better. We tolerate it while waiting for a more interesting version of life to arrive. But what if this is the interesting version? What if the small, unremarkable moments, coffee cooling, light shifting, heartbeat steady, are the entire point? Try sitting completely still for 60 seconds. Don't fill the space, just listen. Feel how vast a single minute becomes when you stop escaping it. That's eternity in miniature, the infinite compressed into now. But most people will never notice because they're too busy chasing the future, hoping it will finally deliver meaning. The present is always vanishing, but not before offering itself to you. The question is, are you looking, or are you already somewhere else? The futility of tomorrow. Tomorrow is humanity's favorite fantasy. It's the stage where all our intentions live, the invisible container for every dream we're too afraid to pursue today. You say you'll start when things calm down, when you're ready, when conditions are right. But tomorrow is a trick. It doesn't exist until it becomes today, and by then you'll have invented another one. Procrastination hides beneath hope. It feels optimistic to delay, noble even. You tell yourself you're waiting for clarity, but clarity doesn't come with time. It comes with action. The universe only reveals itself to those who move. Tomorrow is the world's most polite form of self-sabotage. It promises infinite opportunity while quietly stealing the one resource you can't replace. Every "I'll do it later" is an interest-free loan from your finite lifespan. You pay it back in regret. The truth is brutal, but freeing. You'll never feel ready. Readiness isn't a precondition. It's a product of motion. The courage to begin creates the clarity you've been waiting for. There are only 2 days in life that never truly exist: yesterday and tomorrow. The only time you can act is this one. Take a moment, think about everything you've postponed out of fear or fatigue. Imagine the day when later runs out. Would those things still matter? If yes, begin them now, even badly, even small. The clock is indifferent, but movement gives it meaning. And once you grasp that truth, another illusion begins to crumble, the myth that you can delay decay. The myth of later. Later is the sweetest lie time ever told. It promises second chances, extra years, more strength, more love waiting just over the horizon. It lulls you into thinking life is long, that you have time to waste. But later is a mirage, the road that always looks closer than it is. You think you'll fix it later. Heal later, travel later, apologize later. But people die mid-sentence, mid-plan, mid-promise. Life doesn't pause while you gather courage. It keeps unfolding, indifferent to your intentions. We act as if life were a rehearsal, as if the real performance begins after the next milestone, after the promotion, the move, the right time. But there is no right time. There's only now disguised in future tense. Later has stolen more dreams than failure ever did. The myth of later feeds on fear, the fear of not being ready, not being good enough, not being safe. But safety doesn't exist. It's just another delay tactic. You don't need a perfect plan. You need presence. Take a deep breath. Think of something you keep promising your future self. Then ask, what if I never become them? You are already the person who must act. The moment you stop outsourcing courage to the future, you reclaim your life from delay. Later is a thief, wearing the mask of patience. And when you finally see that, you can begin facing the truth that time doesn't just take from you, it transforms you. That's the lesson of decay. The acceptance of decay. Everything that exists is slowly dying, and that's what makes it precious. Your body, your relationships, your creations, they all follow the same quiet law. Entropy. Cells age, metal rusts, Memories fade. It sounds cruel, but decay is not destruction. It's continuation. The old breaks down so the new can emerge. We spend our lives resisting this. We chase youth, preserve the past, archive the present, pretending permanence is possible. But beauty was never meant to last. It was meant to remind. Decay gives meaning to everything we love. The flower's brevity makes its bloom sacred. The fact that moments end makes them shimmer while they last. Acceptance doesn't mean indifference. It means noticing the fading and calling it beautiful anyway. It's choosing to participate in impermanence instead of denying it. When you accept decay, you stop trying to freeze life like a photograph. You start dancing with it instead. Sit quietly and picture something you once loved that no longer exists. A home, a face, a version of yourself. Feel the ache. That ache is love, acknowledging impermanence. It's the soul saying, "Thank you for happening, even if you're gone." When you learn to see beauty in fading, you stop fearing endings. You realize decay isn't the enemy of life, it's its rhythm. Everything you are is a collection of things that once were and will someday be no more. And yet somehow this moment glows. Because decay isn't death, it's life, changing its form before your eyes. And when you understand that, regret becomes the next ghost to confront. The weight of regret. Regret is the ghost that never stops whispering. It doesn't shout, it hums in the quiet moments when you're driving at night, when you scroll through old photos, when silence finally corners you. It says, "You could have loved harder. You could have tried sooner. You could have been braver." Regret is the tax you pay for awareness that came too late. It reminds you that choice was once yours, and you spent it cheaply. But regret isn't punishment. It's proof that you've grown. You couldn't feel regret if you hadn't changed. Most people run from it. They drown it in distraction, in pride, in noise. But regret, if you listen, is a teacher more honest than any success. It shows you what truly mattered. It burns away your illusions about time. The pain isn't that you failed, it's that you waited. Every regret begins with the same word, later. Later I'll call them. Later I'll try. Later I'll apologize. But later dies quietly, and when you finally return, the moment's gone. You learn too late. That opportunity doesn't announce its departure, it just stops knocking. Take a long breath. Let one regret surface, the one that still aches. Don't fight it. Look it in the eye and ask, "What are you trying to teach me?" Then forgive yourself for not knowing sooner. Wisdom always arrives after the moment that needed it most. Regret never truly leaves, but it softens when it's used. It becomes gratitude in disguise, the proof that next time you'll act while the moment is still alive. And that lesson leads to the next, how little of us truly survives in memory. The illusion of legacy. You want to be remembered. Everyone does. It's the final trick of ego. The belief that if your name outlives your body, you'll somehow continue. But memory is as mortal as flesh. Names fade faster than bones. The world forgets even the brilliant, the beautiful, the brave. And it must, because life has to make room for the living. We write books, build monuments, record our voices, believing these will anchor us against time's tide. But even stars burn out. Even history erases. The libraries of Alexandria burned, and entire worlds vanished with them. Why would yours be any different? At first, this truth feels cruel, but look deeper, and it becomes merciful. If nothing lasts, you're free from the tyranny of legacy. You don't need to craft a perfect story. You only need to live an honest one. Meaning was never supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be experienced. The goal was never to be remembered. It was to have lived. You don't owe eternity your masterpiece. You owe this moment your attention. Legacy is a myth invented to comfort our fear of vanishing. But vanishing is what gives life its purity. A sunset doesn't need to last to be sacred. Neither do you. So create, love, build, teach. but let go of immortality. Be the ripple, not the monument. Be the warmth that lingers, not the statue that erodes. Because once you stop needing to be remembered, you finally start to live like someone who remembers how fragile all of this really is. The equality of death. Death is the great equalizer, but not because it's fair, because it's absolute. Kings and beggars end the same way, their bodies returning to dust, their names swallowed by time. Death levels every hierarchy, silences every argument. It humbles the arrogant and comforts the humble. In death, the rich can't bargain and the powerful can't command. For once, the game ends for everyone. We spend our lives pretending this law doesn't apply to us. We call death tragedy, as if we expected an exception. But death isn't the opposite of life. It's its completion. Without it, life would have no urgency, no flavor, no meaning. Eternity would be unbearable repetition. Mortality is what sharpens existence into art. Look around and notice how much of what you chase would crumble if you remembered that every breath is borrowed. The deadlines, the arguments, the pride, they shrink in the shadow of finality. Death doesn't make life meaningless, it makes it immediate. Sit quietly for a moment and think of all the faces that have already returned to the earth. People you once loved, people you never met. They all walked this same path. You will too. So will everyone you know. That truth doesn't need to terrify you. It can purify you. Because in the equality of death, you learn how to finally live equally in life, without comparison, without envy, without arrogance. Every heartbeat echoes the same reminder: you don't own a single moment. You're only borrowing it. And soon you'll have to return it. The gift of memento mori. To remember death is to remember life in its truest form. Memento mori, remember you must die, isn't an obsession with endings. It's an awakening to presence. It's the reminder that every day could be the last sunrise you ever see, the last word you ever speak, the last breath you ever take. It sounds grim, but it's liberation. Because when you accept death, you stop dying before you actually die. Awareness of mortality refines everything. Food tastes richer. Music feels deeper. Love becomes sacred. The petty dissolves. The cruel loses its appeal. Death turns every moment into an unrepeatable miracle. To live without remembering death is to sleep through the symphony. The Stoics carried death as a companion, not an enemy. They greeted it every morning to keep vanity small and gratitude large. Try it. Wake up and whisper, "I might not see another sunrise." Then notice how gently you move through your day, how patient you become, how much nonsense you stop chasing. Memento mori isn't darkness. It's light that burns away triviality. It doesn't make you morbid. It makes you merciful. You forgive faster, love harder, listen longer. You realize that everyone you meet is dying too, and suddenly compassion becomes your instinct. Death isn't there to threaten you. It's there to teach you how to live. It's the whisper behind every heartbeat saying, "Don't waste this." And once you start listening, life stops feeling like something slipping away. It starts feeling like something you've finally caught. Because to remember death is to be fully awake. And to be fully awake is to finally be alive. The fear of non-existence. The fear of death isn't the fear of pain, it's the fear of absence. The thought that the world will continue without you, that your mind will dissolve into silence, that you'll never again know. It's the unthinkable mystery of not being able to think. Human consciousness can imagine eternity, but not its own ending. The mind can't picture nothing. It can only stare into the concept until it trembles. That's why religions, philosophies, and myths exist, not to explain death, but to comfort life. The mind builds eternity to escape the void. But what if the void isn't horror? What if it's peace so complete that no one remains to name it? Fear of non-existence keeps you small. You cling to the temporary, pretending it's forever. You resist sleep, aging, stillness, anything that resembles the great silence waiting ahead. But everything in nature dies without protest. Trees fall, rivers dry, stars fade. They return to the cycle that made them, neither rewarded nor punished. Maybe that's the truth. Death isn't punishment, it's participation. Take a deep breath. Inhale the air you didn't create. Exhale into the world that will outlast you. That's the rhythm you've always been part of. Non-existence isn't exile, it's home. It's the moment the wave returns to the ocean and remembers it was never separate. The fear of death fades when you stop seeing yourself as something that ends. You're not a possession being taken, you're a pattern returning. And when you realize that, death stops being enemy and becomes guide. Because remembering death is how you finally remember life. The peace of surrender. There is a kind of peace that only comes when you stop fighting everything. Not the peace of winning, not the peace of escaping, the peace of release. It's the stillness that settles when you finally say, let it be. Most people confuse surrender with defeat. They think giving up control means weakness. But surrender isn't submission, it's alignment. It's realizing that the river was always carrying you. You were just exhausting yourself trying to swim upstream. The world doesn't bend to your will, no matter how strong it grows, but it will cradle you if you learn to float. Surrender begins in small moments. The traffic jam you can't change, the apology that never comes, the love that doesn't return. Instead of tightening your grip, you exhale. You stop demanding that life be different before you allow yourself peace. You learn that control was an illusion, tension wearing a purpose mask. There's a strength in yielding. Bamboo survives storms that break oak. The ocean doesn't resist the rock. It reshapes it. Surrender is the wisdom of patience disguised as stillness. Take a slow breath and think of what you're still wrestling with, the thing you keep revisiting in your mind. What would happen if you stopped, not gave up, stopped fighting it? Peace was never waiting at the end of struggle. It was waiting underneath it. And when you surrender, something subtle happens. Life begins to move through you instead of against you. Because once you stop fighting reality, you begin to see what it was trying to teach all along. The calm of acceptance. Acceptance is quieter than surrender. It's not the act of giving up. It's the moment you finally understand. You stop pleading with the past to change. You stop arguing with the present. You stop performing grief as a form of control. Acceptance is the end of resistance. It doesn't erase pain. It ends the war with it. We resist reality because we think resistance gives us power, but it only gives us exhaustion. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It means presence. It means seeing what is and choosing to stay conscious anyway. You can't heal what you keep rejecting. You can't love what you refuse to see. Every emotional wound begins to close the moment it's witnessed without judgment. The heart expands not when life gets easier, but when the mind stops saying this shouldn't be happening. Acceptance turns suffering into understanding, not instantly, but inevitably. It teaches you that peace doesn't depend on circumstance. It depends on clarity. Take a breath. Think about the one truth you've been avoiding, the thing you can't change, no matter how much you wish you could. Now imagine releasing the need for it to be different. Feel the weight slide off, the muscles unclench. That's acceptance. It doesn't fix life, it makes life breathable again. And once you taste that calm, the noise fades. You begin to notice something deeper beneath all motion, the strength that lives inside stillness. The strength of stillness. Stillness isn't the absence of power, it's the source of it. Everything strong in nature is rooted before it rises. Mountains don't chase storms, they endure them. Oceans don't seek attention, they mirror the sky. The most powerful beings you'll ever meet carry stillness like gravity. They don't rush to prove, to argue, to win. They radiate the quiet confidence of someone who knows where they stand. But stillness is hard because it feels like inaction. We've been trained to believe that movement equals progress, that noise equals relevance. Silence threatens the ego. It can't perform there. Yet in stillness, the mind stops echoing long enough for truth to be heard. The disciplined soul learns to be still without being stagnant. Stillness isn't laziness, it's mastery of attention. It's the ability to stay calm while the world spins, to think clearly while others panic. The more still you are, the more everything around you reveals its true form. Sit now in your own silence. Notice how the body still hums, the heart still beats, the air still moves. Even in stillness, life happens. The world doesn't need your constant interference to keep turning. This is the lesson: power hides in plain sight. Movement hides fear. Stillness reveals power. And once you can stand still inside chaos, you begin to see that not knowing isn't weakness either. It's wonder. The freedom of not knowing. Certainty is a cage built by fear. We spend our lives trying to solve existence, what happens after death, what's right or wrong, what the future holds. But the mind's obsession with knowing kills curiosity. It turns mystery into anxiety. You were never meant to have all the answers. You were meant to live the questions. The freedom of not knowing is the permission to breathe inside uncertainty. It's the childlike wonder that lets you look at the stars without needing to name them. It's humility, the acceptance that you are small and temporary, yet still part of something infinite. Every wise person eventually arrives at this same truth. Reality is larger than comprehension, and peace begins where explanation ends. Ignorance is pretending to know. Wisdom is knowing you don't. The most peaceful minds aren't those that conquered mystery. They befriended it. They learned to sit beside it and listen, to explore without needing closure. Take a moment to feel how much energy you spend forcing certainty into places it doesn't belong: the relationship, the career, the faith, the self. Now imagine releasing the need to label everything as good or bad, right or wrong. What's left isn't confusion. It's clarity of a different kind, one that feels like trust. The unknown isn't your enemy. It's the space where life creates. And when you surrender to that creative uncertainty, meaning stops being something you hunt, it becomes something that finds you. The paradox of meaning. Meaning is both the weight that crushes you and the wind that carries you. You spend your life searching for it, in work, in love, in faith, believing it's something you'll one day uncover, like a secret code that explains everything. But meaning isn't found. It's made. And the paradox is that the moment you stop demanding it, it begins to appear everywhere. Life has no built-in purpose. That terrifies some and frees others. The blankness of existence is an invitation, not a punishment. You are the one who gives shape to it through attention. Wash a dish with care, and it becomes sacred. Listen fully, and conversation becomes communion. The ordinary becomes holy when seen clearly. We suffer most when we try to make meaning permanent. But meaning, like emotion, changes with context. What once gave you life may now feel empty. And that's okay. It means you're still evolving. The river doesn't curse the stones it outgrew. It just flows onward. Meaning lives in the doing, not the defining. It's created in small acts of awareness, the kindness you offer when no one sees, the laughter shared under fragile light, the courage to keep searching after every illusion collapses. Nothing has meaning until you give it your attention, and once you do, everything does. Pause for a long breath. Let your mind stop chasing purpose for a moment. Notice the quiet pulse beneath your ribs, the hum of being alive. That's meaning, not an answer, but an experience. And when you understand that, you're finally ready for what comes next. Simplicity, serenity, and the quiet grace of enough. The serenity of simplicity. Simplicity isn't the absence of things. It's the presence of clarity. It's walking into your life and realizing that most of what you carried wasn't essential. It was emotional clutter disguised as importance. Every possession, every obligation, every digital tether whispers, "You need me." But truth whispers back, "No, you don't." We fill our lives to avoid feeling empty. We collect objects, titles, goals, even relationships like souvenirs against mortality. But simplicity begins the moment you stop equating fullness with meaning. The less you need, the more you see. A simple life doesn't mean a small one. It means a focused one where each object, each action, each moment earns its place. Imagine waking tomorrow with only what you love, not what you're afraid to lose. That's serenity. That's space. In that space, gratitude blooms. You start to notice the subtle miracles, the smell of rain, the rhythm of your breath, the weight of sunlight on your skin. You realize that life was never rushing. Only you were. Simplicity is the art of editing yourself back to truth. Strip away the excess until what remains is honest. What you keep will finally feel alive again. And in that still room of less, you'll rediscover what was waiting behind the noise, presence itself. The power of presence. Presence is the opposite of absence, but not in the way you think. Absence is being elsewhere, even while standing here. It's checking your phone mid-conversation, thinking about the next task, reliving a past mistake. Presence is what remains when all of that dissolves. It's attention, raw and unbroken. When you're truly present, even the mundane becomes sacred. A sip of water feels like communion. The sound of a clock becomes music. You don't need grand moments. You need awake ones. The world doesn't come alive because it changes. It comes alive because you finally look. Presence is a discipline. It's harder than meditation, harder than prayer. It demands your full attention to what is, not what could be. You can't be present and control at the same time. Presence requires surrender. It asks you to stop fixing and start witnessing, to let each moment pass through you without resistance or demand. Take a slow breath. Feel the air enter and leave your body. That's time happening through you. That's proof you exist right now, not in memory, not in fantasy, in reality. The more present you become, the softer everything feels. Even pain becomes bearable when you stop trying to edit it. Because presence teaches the simplest, hardest truth of all. You already have enough. You always did. The quiet of enough. Enough is the word that ends the world's noise. It's the point where ambition bows to gratitude, where hunger gives way to stillness. You spend most of your life chasing what's next. More success, more love, more validation. But there comes a day, sometimes quietly, when you realize you're not starving anymore. You were just afraid to stop eating. Enough doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It means you stop running. It's the gentle exhale after decades of inhaling need. The mind, conditioned to strive, panics at first. It whispers, if I stop, I'll fall behind. But behind what? There is no race. There never was. The finish line was a mirage made of fear. To live as if you have enough is the most radical act of peace in a culture addicted to more. It's rebellion without noise. It's refusing to measure your life by comparison. Enough isn't complacency. It's mastery, the point where you finally understand the value of balance. You learn to want without worship, to build without desperation, to love without clinging. Take a long breath. Ask yourself softly, what if this is already enough? Feel what happens in your body. The tension loosens. The air thickens with quiet. That's contentment. The soul remembering its natural state. Enough doesn't end your story. It allows you to finally live it. And once you live from that stillness, the search for meaning ends where it began, in being. The art of being. Being is the simplest thing and the hardest. It asks nothing of you. No improvement, no performance, no explanation. Yet you resist it because doing feels safer. Doing keeps you distracted from the vastness of existence itself. To just be is to meet life as it is, unpolished, imperfect, breathtakingly temporary. It's standing barefoot in the middle of reality and saying, this is enough. No striving, no stories, just awareness of awareness. The mind hates it because it can't claim credit for it, but the soul knows its home. In being, time stops being a threat. Past and future lose their teeth. You realize the present doesn't move. You do. And for a moment, everything, grief, joy, longing, becomes part of the same pulse. You no longer chase wholeness. You notice you were never apart. Try sitting in silence for a while. Don't meditate. Don't think. Just exist. Feel how the air moves around you, how life breathes through you even when you do nothing. That's the art of being. Effortless participation in everything. Existence doesn't ask you to be special. It asks you to be sincere. And when you learn that, even death loses its final edge. Because you realize you were never separate from the world you feared leaving. You were never a visitor here. You were always home. The final lesson. All your life, you've been gathering pieces, lessons, loves, losses, believing they'd build a solid structure called you. But here, at the quiet end of all understanding, you see the truth. There was never a structure, only movement, only moments, only this infinite dance between arrival and disappearance. Everything you've loved was borrowed. Every heartbeat, every sunrise, every word, and still, it was enough. The miracle was never that you lived forever. It was that you lived at all. You came here not to conquer, but to witness. Not to win, but to learn how to let go. Every illusion, every fear, every ambition has been a teacher whispering the same truth. You don't own any of this, and you never needed to. When the final moment comes, it won't ask for your achievements. It will ask only one question. Did you pay attention? Did you notice the rain, the laughter, the small kindnesses that built the architecture of your days? If you did, then you didn't waste your life. You lived it, wildly, briefly, completely. Take one last breath with that awareness. Inhale everything that was, exhale everything that will be. And in that stillness between the two, you'll feel what you've been searching for all along. Not meaning, not victory, not certainty, but the quiet, unshakable truth that none of it was ever yours, and that was always the gift. The final lesson, you never owned anything. You only borrowed time, and it was beautiful while it lasted. And so these were the truths most people run from, the ones that sting before they set you free. Life doesn't soften its lessons. It only repeats them until you listen. Every harsh truth you heard tonight hides a strange mercy, the kind that forces you to grow, to let go, and to finally see yourself without the filters of comfort or denial. If even one of these lessons stayed with you, let it shape the way you wake tomorrow. Not with fear, but with clarity. Thank you for listening. If this journey gave you something real, something you didn't want to hear but couldn't ignore, subscribe, like the video, and share the truth that hit you hardest. Because sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that finally make you honest. And as the world quiets, may that honesty be the peace that lasts.